And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Tuesday, September 28th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher, and we are back to do the same thing that we did a few hours ago. We've got a lot more information to do it with. So before we do anything, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Give a quick shout out to Prize Picks for being the presenting sponsor of this show. We're going to have a good one. We got a lot to talk about. But for right now, let's start here. Adam, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Looks like we still haven't gotten I don't think we've gotten Barnes confirmed yet. So
I don't think
didn't get that piece answered from this morning. But a lot more lineups to talk about. Can break down the slate a little bit differently than we did this morning.
I'm ready to dive into this one. I've been looking at this slate a lot. You have too. We've had some extended conversations, but it's now time to put it all into practice. Let's kick this bad boy off with your Orioles, who are not in a great spot against the Red Sox. 3.6 run implied total for Baltimore, 5.7 for Boston. It's Bruce Zimmerman and Chris Sale. We're not rostering Bruce Zimmerman. We're not even going to waste our time talking about it. Let's talk a little bit about Chris Sale. 31% owned at last blush. What do you want to do with Chris Sale?
So in the crunch I ran this morning, he ended up being my highest owned pitcher on DraftKings, and I'm fine with that. I don't feel like super strongly about it, but there's just a lot of good pitching on this slate, and Sale's a little bit cheaper than the other guys that I like the most. Like, I think Sale is in that same tier with Woodruff and with Zach Wheeler, but you're getting him discounted on DraftKings, $900 less expensive than Woodruff, $1,100 less expensive than Wheeler. The biggest question mark I have with Sale is just exactly what does it look like? What does his best game look like in terms of how many pitches the Red Sox let him throw, how deep into the game he goes? Because we've only seen him reach 6 innings once this season, but there's been so many extenuating circumstances that make me feel like that's not a true cap, or at least, that getting to 6 innings is more likely than 1 out of 7 starts or whatever it's been so far. He's been in a disproportionate amount of blowouts where, for example, in his last start against the Orioles, he through 5 innings, only threw 79 pitches. It was like a 7-run game, 6-run game, something like that. No real reason to leave him in. The Red Sox are still in the playoff race, though. So if this is a 1-0 game or 2-0 game and Sale hits 79 pitches after 5 innings, I have a hard time thinking that he's not getting that extra inning to get him up to that 90, 95 pitch mark that we've seen him get to already. So I would be kind of surprised if you got one of those, 105, 110 pitch games, sort of out of nowhere for Sale. But I do think that if you just look at his game logs, I'm leaning towards thinking that it kind of gives a false impression of exactly, where they're limiting him at. So I think you can get 6 innings from Sale here. The Orioles, we don't have their lineup yet, but we just came out. Oh, just came out. Okay.
Literally just came out.
Yeah. So we know Anthony Santander is on the injured list. Cedric Mullins is back in the lineup. I thought there was a chance he would miss this game again, but losing Santander does still weaken the lineup a bit. You essentially have 5 hitters, 1 through 5, that are competent to very good, depending on who we're talking about. Then it just drops off the face of the earth. 6 through 9 should go very, very well for Sale. So it's really just, can he navigate his way through what is essentially average to slightly above average hitters for the most part at the top of this order? He only struck out 1 guy against the Orioles 2 starts ago. I'm not reading into that. I don't think that's likely to continue. It is a right-handed heavy lineup. The only lefty in there is Mullins, but overall, I think it's a good spot for Sale. I like that he's discounted from some of the other aces. I expect his 26.5% strikeout percentage to increase as the sample size gets bigger. And overall, he's been pretty good this year. So I like getting to Sale.
I like him as well. I'm going to speak generally here. Wheeler, Woodruff, Sale, Morton, Buehler, Wainwright, Webb. I kind of like all of these guys in a pretty similar manner relative to their salary. I think they all just look like guys that I'm going to have a lot of, and the large majority of my ownership is going to pay up for pitching today. So I like Sale. He comes out second in my model behind Brandon Woodruff. That works for me. If I end up having a little bit less than that 34% ownership because I have a little bit more Charlie Morton or Buehler or something, I'm okay with it. But I think it's a very clear day to be paying up for pitching.
Yeah, agreed. Combination of things. One, there's a lot of it. So naturally, the ownership is going to just be flattened out. This isn't one of those slates where you're going to expect to get 55, 60% going to Zach Wheeler, and you're really making some sort of ownership, determination on that. There's so many guys at the top that it's just naturally going to pull down the ownership on everyone. And then also you have a lot of just completely mispriced hitting where you like normally when you're paying down for pitching, the thought process is you're getting the best bats. But on this particular slate, there's so many inexpensive, good bats that if you are paying up for bats, that's fine. It's going to be a contrarian approach. But the issue is that it's going to put you in a situation where it forces you to pay for cheaper pitching. And really, you're going to be playing against teams that just have the good pitching and just as good hitting. So it's going to put you in a tough spot.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the Boston Red Sox bats. I have them as my number 2 stack behind Colorado in Coors today. I also have them as the third biggest negative leverage stack on the slate. I want to get to some Boston. I expect to have them more as lineup filler than full-on 5-mans just because of their ownership, but they certainly look great. Unquestionably a top stack, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. The only real issue is the ownership because they are so inexpensive on DraftKings. The most expensive hitter is you have Bogarts at $5K, Devers at $4,900, Schwarber in the lineup at $4,900, but $4,200 Kike, Renfroe, $4,100 Martinez. These guys all stand out. Bobby Dahlbeck, $3,100, hitting 7th. So against a pitcher in Zimmerman that doesn't have very good strikeout stuff and has given up plenty of power this year in a limited sample, only an 18.9% strikeout percentage to righties, 204 expected ISO, 383 expected WOBA. It looks like a very, very good spot for Boston. When I ran lineups earlier, I didn't get as much Boston as the field. That may or may not change between now and lock, but either way, I think that it's a very good spot as long as you are getting to them and paying attention to the ownership, making sure that as a whole, your lineup isn't too popular. In cash games, I think this is definitely a team you're looking to. Renfroe jumps out. JD Martinez jumps out. Kike at 4,200, a possibility as well, although he did lose that second base eligibility, so maybe a little bit more difficult to get to him.
I don't think that we're going to be going to any Baltimore Orioles bats here.
No, I mean, if I did, It would be what?
Hayes at 3,500.
Yeah, I was going to say Hayes, Mancini, Severino, because he's a catcher, that 3 through 5 where it's 3,500, 3,400, 3,100. That's probably where I would look. Certainly Mullins and Mountcastle are fine as well, but they're more expensive. But overall on a 13 game slate, I don't anticipate really getting to the Orioles.
All right, let's move it on to Blue Jays and Yankees. 4.9 run implied total for the Jays, 4.4 for the Yanks. Ryu and Tyon, and neither guy is getting any ownership. I think that I'm going to end up with a little bit of Ryu. It doesn't make me super happy, but at 8K, he showed up in my sim at 8%. I think that he does work as a mild pay down option. Certainly not fun to attack the Yankees. I think that I'm going to end up with 5 to 10%. I don't want to advocate too hard for either one of these pitchers because this is a game for offense.
That's where I'm at as well. They're both good enough where, playing 150 lineups, if they sneak in a little bit, that's fine. 8K Ryu certainly can have a good game. Same goes for Tyon. But if I'm playing 1 lineup or 3 max, I wouldn't expect to get to them. Even in 150 max, I'm not positive I get to them. No strong takes on the pitching here. They're certainly talented enough that they can go out there and have a good game, but neither matchup is one that I really like. Blue Jays really difficult to strike out, have tons of power. The Yankees, not as difficult to strike out, but Ryu's not a very good strikeout pitcher. They have plenty of power as well. So, again, there's tons of good pitching on this slate, and neither of these guys are that discounted relative to the pitchers that we actually like.
Blue Jays are 7th in my top stack model. Yankees are 8th, but they are 1 and 2 in my leverage score. These guys are fully unowned across both sides. Highest owned hitter on either side of this game is George Springer at 1.4%. This is the place that I am taking my stand. I'm going to be looking to get to more Toronto Blue Jays and New York Yankees. What say you?
Yeah, I don't think I'm taking as aggressive a stand here as you are, but I do agree that being over the field and just getting to these teams in general, which makes you over the field, is a pretty good spot to be at just based on the upside these offenses offer. Both of these pitchers are good. Neither one is excellent. Neither one is somebody that I'm just looking at them and, running the other direction. Ryu has allowed 1.24 home runs per 9 this year. Tyon's allowed 1.56 home runs per 9. Both of these lineups have massive amounts of power. Toronto is up to a 5 implied run total. The Yankees are sitting at 4.6, but it's just that kind of the way I put it this morning. I think in these particular matchups, the margin for error for these pitchers is so small. If Ryu comes out and has his A game, he probably is going to do enough to make the Yankees not have success. Same goes for Tyon. But if they're even a little bit off and you kind of get that B- or C+ game from these guys, they're not quite talented enough where that's likely to get by these offenses. It might have success against a team like the Diamondbacks or the Angels or something, but both of these offenses are so talented that I expect them to throw up runs if either pitcher is just not on top of his game. So at basically no ownership, I do like getting to these teams. 9
of the 18 hitters in this game have steamer ISOs higher than 200.
Yeah, it's just it's so much power at essentially no ownership.
And the weirder part to me is that the Yankees are so cheap and unowned. Do you?
Even that makes sense though, because you have the free Red Sox, you have the free Forest game.
I was just going to say, like, do you think it's probably a little bit high? They're probably like 4 to 5 by the time we get to lock.
It wouldn't shock me, but at the same time, I can see why they would be really low because, again, you have those teams I just mentioned, but even the Angels are dirt cheap across the board. Like they have 2 hitters in their entire lineup above $2,700 or $2,900 on DraftKings. There's so many ways that you can go to save money. And then on top of that, there's also a lot of teams that are in really good spots. So it makes sense to me why the Yankees are low owned. It's just a situation where I think the payoffs to being there and them doing well are worth, the fact that they're not the best stack tonight.
Do you have a preference between the 2 teams?
I think it's really close. Like Toronto is favored, but you are also getting 9 at bats from the Yankees, which is nice. I don't feel really strongly one way or the other. I think the pricing is more favorable on the Yankees. So I guess that would move me in their direction a little bit.
Only thing that I would say is that I think the matchup works a little bit better. Blue Jays are running out 8 righties against Taillon, so I think it could be a little bit easier to just get to some Yankees, especially with the price tags. But I'm happy to have a bunch of both of these guys. So go Blue Jays, go Yankees. That's for sure. Anything else here?
No.
Braves and Phillies, 3.9 run implied total for the Braves, 3.6 for the Phils. Charlie Morton and Zach Wheeler. This is basically the inverse of Jays and Yankees. I really like both pitchers. I'm going to play them a bunch, and I will not be getting to the hitting. Talk to me about whichever pitcher you want to start with.
I'll start with Wheeler just because he's the most expensive pitcher on the slate. I think the outlook for both of these guys is pretty similar. They're both really, really good pitchers. They're both likely to have success here. Wheeler he's tied with Darvish for the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate. 2.86 xFIP is the second best on the slate. He's been fantastic this year. He's averaging nearly 7 innings per start as well. The concern, there's kind of 2. The big one is that the Braves have tons and tons of power in this lineup. Since the trade deadline as a team, they have a 204 ISO, 102 WRC plus. There are some strikeouts. You can strike out Soler, Riley, Duvall, Swanson. These guys all have 25+% strikeout percentages against right-handed pitching over the last 3 years. But as a whole, they don't really strike out that much. Freeman, Albies, they're difficult to strike out. Rosario and d'Arnaud aren't the highest strikeout guys either. So I think it's a pretty neutral, mediocre strikeout matchup for Wheeler. It does help, of course, that he's facing a pitcher and Morton strikes out 40+% of the time. So it's not like Herman Marquez, who somehow just, puts the ball in play constantly. You're getting a free strikeout basically at the bottom of the order. So I like Wheeler here. The issue, if there is one, is kind of just that price point when there is so much good pitching on this slate. But at the same time, it keeps the ownership in check, only projected for 23% on DraftKings. Morton on the other side, basically the same concerns. He's been very, very good this year as well. Strikeout percentage only a point shy of Wheeler at 28.2%, 3.36 xFIP. The Phillies lineup isn't as scary as the Braves, but this lineup is just flat out difficult to strike out top to bottom. Top to Freddie Galvis. Wheeler strikes out, but Herrera, Segura, Harper, Real Muto, Gregorius, and I believe Galvis all strike out less than 22% of the time against right-handed pitching. The only guy in this lineup that strikes out more than average is Brad Miller, and even he is like 26.5%. It's not like he's going up there and striking out a third of the time or anything. So it's a pretty difficult strikeout spot for Morton, but he is offering savings compared to somebody like Wheeler, compared to Brandon Woodruff, and then he's offering an ownership discount compared to somebody like Chris Sale. So between the two, I think Sale looks a bit better, but just looking at the top pitchers tool, for example, Chris Sale, 16.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, Charlie Morton, 15%, but Sale getting twice as much ownership. So that's something that I think, especially in lineups where you're going to more popular hitting, it's going to just kind of push Charlie Morton up a little bit for me because you are getting such an ownership discount compared to Sale.
I have the Phillies 23rd of 26 today. I have Atlanta 24th of 26. Are you going to get to any of the offenses?
I don't really see anything. Like the guys that I would want aren't even that inexpensive. I mean, you could, I guess, sell me on Brad Miller because he's got tons of power and he's relatively cheap. But normally when you talk about the Phillies, you talk about the Braves, regardless of matchup, you're saying, Real Muto looks good. Harper looks good. Freeman looks good. Riley looks good. You can always roster those guys, but you're paying a premium to do it against some of the best pitchers in baseball. So it's a pretty tough sell.
Cool. Keep it moving. Twins and Tigers. 5.4 run implied total for the Twins, 4.1 for the Tigers. Allegedly, Charlie Barnes and Tyler Alexander going here. Are you going to roster either one of the pitchers?
Now, no real interest in the pitching. I did say if Barnes starts, you could sort of make a case for him just because he's cheap and facing the Tigers. But that was, this morning kind of as we talked through the slate, after going through it all and sort of seeing how it breaks down, I just don't think there's really any need to be getting to a $5,100 Barnes.
I'm with you. And I don't think that we're going to be getting to Tyler Alexander, but I do think we're going to be getting to some Twins bats. They are my number 3 stack. A little bit over-owned at the top, less so at the bottom. Buxton pulling the most ownership, but Donaldson and Garver up a little bit from when we talked earlier today. How are you handling Minnesota against Tyler Alexander?
They are kind of similar to the Red Sox to me. I like the Red Sox spot better, but I mean that in the sense of I like this spot against Tyler Alexander. I hope I get to Minnesota. This morning, I wasn't really getting to much. They just happened to be one of the teams I was losing out on because of ownership, but certainly I'm not looking at this like, oh, I don't think this is a good spot for the Twins. I don't want to get there. It's just, compared to some of the other spots, I think there's a decent chance that this is one of the ones I sort of lose. But if you're someone looking at it and saying, I'm going to play Minnesota, I still think that's perfectly fine. Just pay attention to what else is going into your lineup, because without a doubt, this is a good spot for the Twins. Assuming they run out their normal lineup, you have a lot of right-handed power here going up against a pitcher in Tyler Alexander that doesn't have particularly good strikeout stuff. Only an 18.5% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters this year, 211 expected ISO, 341 expected WOBA. Not the kind of numbers that you're going to really want going up against Buxton, Polanco, Donaldson, Garver, Rooker, Sano, most likely 1 through 6. Astudillo potentially in the lineup as well, just somebody that puts the ball in play constantly. There's plenty of upside here, and the pricing is certainly reasonable.
Yeah, I'm going to happily have at least a little bit of the Twins here. Like I said, they are my number 3 stack overall. I'm going to be cognizant of the ownership, though, in particular for Buxton, who's looking like a pretty good cash play today. What about on the Tigers side, up against Barnes? I actually have them 10th overall. I don't think it's crazy to get there. They just might be a little bit too far down the list of interesting teams to get to. Yeah,
I was getting to them a bit this morning, but I do think that comes down between now and lock, just because, again, our numbers are a little bit more favorable for the Tigers, I think, because for whatever reason, it just gets kind of wonky when the opposing starter isn't confirmed. So I think that comes down. And also, I guess related, I think Minnesota goes up. Like right now they're
going to be one of the top 4 for sure.
Right. Yeah. Right now we have Detroit with a higher top stack percentage than Minnesota. This morning when I ran that initial crunch, it was way higher. So that's another reason why I wasn't getting to Minnesota and I was getting to Detroit. But I think Detroit makes some sense in tournaments. Charlie Barnes didn't put up particularly good numbers in the minors this year. He hasn't been particularly good in the majors. The Tigers aren't a good offense, but you do have some power when you have, Baду at the top, followed by Scope, Grossman, Cabrera, Candelario. Eric Haas batting 7th gives you some low-owned power from that spot. So I'm fine with the Tigers, but like you said, probably not going to get crazy amounts just because there's so many teams that are better than the Tigers.
Anything else, Twins and Tigers?
Nope, think that's about it. Just look at some bats.
Sounds good. Schedule for the rest of the day. This one's easy. MLB Live Before Lock. Coming up after this, you don't even have to leave the stream. It just continues. Eric and Greg will take you all the way up until 7:05. And then that's it. We're done for the day. Tuesdays are pretty easy around these parts. Free content, MLB player projections, PGA top golfers. If you're looking to get into Sanderson Farms this Thursday, you can use our top golfers tool to do so. We keep it moving. Cardinals and Brewers. This is sort of like the anti-Blue Jays and Yankees. Very similar to Braves, Phillies. Wainwright and Woodruff, just a little bit different for Wainwright, I guess. Wainwright, only 9% owned. Woodruff, on the other hand, 32%. I think Woodruff's ownership is perfectly reasonable, but I'd like to get to a little bit more Wainwright, just given the ownership. How are you feeling about the pitching?
I think the Wainwright take is reasonable. This morning, I basically got more Darvish instead of Wainwright, but I don't feel very strongly about that. I think they serve basically the same purpose here. 2 very different pitchers, but also 2 very different matchups. Wainwright's only struck out about 21% of hitters this year, but he's been good at preventing runs. He has a sub-4 xFIP, less than 1 home run per 9 innings. The Brewers only have a 3.6 implied run total. There are some strikeouts in that lineup. You have Taylor and Vogelbach in there. Those guys will strike out. Peterson's not the best hitter either. So a little bit watered down Milwaukee lineup also. So Wainwright, I think, is fine at 9K. He doesn't have the same sort of strikeout upside as Chris Sale or Charlie Morton or Walker Buehler, all in that price range, Logan Webb as well. And that's what's going to drive the ownership down, but he's still a good pitcher. And so it's like if Wainwright has, I don't want to say his best game because he had that absurd game earlier this year. But if Wainwright has his like 80th percentile game and a couple of those other guys have their 80th percentile games, Wainwright's going to lose. But if none of them have, one of their best games of the season, there's certainly a good enough chance that Wainwright sort of just beats out the more popular guys. And if you are stacking Boston, you are stacking Minnesota, you're stacking these more popular teams, you're getting a close enough range of outcomes, I think, from Wainwright at lower ownership than the higher strikeout pitchers around him. So that's where he fits in. I'm not actively seeking out Wainwright, but there's going to be some lineups where I just happen to have more popular hitting, and it's going to force me to somebody like Wainwright or Darvish, we'll talk about later.
Absolutely. Woodruff is my top guy. I don't really have much else to add here. Just is. And offenses are not in play for me in this one.
No, me neither. There's not really much to see. The Cardinals, since the trade deadline, actually have a 114 WRC plus, but I'm not reading too much into that. It's not like their team substantially changed or anything. They've just been hitting really, really well. The biggest issue for the Cardinals is that they don't strike out a lot, but Woodruff's a good enough pitcher that he can just strike out anybody. I think he's one of the top guys on the slate. The only slight concern I have for Woodruff, in addition to the low strikeout percentage for the Cardinals, is we've already seen Milwaukee sort of take their foot off the gas with Woodruff in most of his recent starts. You're seeing him go 6 innings and then come out, even when he's at, like 90 pitches or so. If they were still in the playoff race, I fully think you would be getting, 7-8 innings at, 105 pitches from Woodruff. They've officially clinched their division now. They aren't going to catch the winner of the West. So I think there's a non-zero chance that they have an even shorter leash on Woodruff here, and that just they potentially piss off 1/3 of the field. But I don't think that's the most likely outcome by any means. So it's not something that I'm actively pulling back on Woodruff or anything. Just kind of, I guess, putting it out there. Don't be totally shocked if you get some stupid 5-inning game from Woodruff.
That's fair. Rangers and Angels. Your Rangers, 4.5 run implied total for Texas, 4.7 for the Angels. AJ Alexy and Packy Naughton. Alexi actually got to 3% ownership. I got him at 8% coming out of the sim. So I might have a little bit here of Alexi, but nothing too crazy. This is more of a hitting game than it is a pitching game.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Alexi if you need to pay down. I think he's one of the better pay down options. I just don't really think it's that necessary to pay down. He's had very mixed results through his first 4 major league starts, carved up the Rockies, carved up this Angels team, got lit up by the Astros and the Yankees. Clearly, the Angels are not the same sort of offense as the Astros and Yankees. So I'm not reading too much into those recent starts, other than it basically confirmed what I expected to be the case when he came up. Alexi's got pretty good strikeout stuff. He's also probably not ready to be a major league pitcher. He's going to just be inconsistent. So at low ownership and a cheap price tag, volatility is actually your friend in tournaments. But again, there's just so much cheap hitting that I don't think he's going to be totally necessary. Naughton on the other side, good matchup against Texas, but just not needing to pay down for pitching and then thinking that he's not a particularly good strikeout pitcher anyway. I don't really have interest there.
Someone in chat just asked, why so much love for St. Louis? I don't think we mentioned anyone. Literally not a single name.
I said the Cardinals have been hot, but I don't care. Woodruff's still really good. I don't know.
Yeah, craziness. I have the Angels as my number 4 stack. I have the Rangers 13th. I'm curious where you want to go in this one. Are you going more Angels or more Rangers?
I think more Angels. I was getting a lot of Texas earlier, and I still think that's a decent spot. Naughton's not very good. Fortunately for me, based on what you and I were talking about earlier, Jose Trevino not in the lineup. I was getting a lot of him in that early crunch just because he was a cheap catcher. You have Jonah Heim in there. He can actually hit a bit. DJ Peters has some power. Solak, Lowe, Garcia. It's not the worst. I mean, it's close to the worst team, but it's not the worst lineup. And going up against Naughton is fine. But I do think that as we get the actual lineups and everything, closer to lock, I end up getting less Texas than I was earlier. But certainly a team that I think is going a little bit lower owned than they probably should, given the matchup. The Angels, though, I really like because they are really inexpensive. Alexi, like I was saying before, I think is a very volatile pitcher. He's going to have some good games. And this is certainly an offense that doesn't give me a lot of confidence. But at the same time, he's really a AAA pitcher, I think, and he's going to have some games where he just doesn't have it. He walks too many guys. He gets behind the counts. Brandon Marsh is 2,200 leading off, so I like that. Ohtani and Walsh are actually good. You have $2,300 4 and 5 hitters, followed by a $2,200 Jose Rojas, $2,700 catcher in Max Stassi. So this is a team where, even though it's not the best offense, you still can get some upside here, and then around it have whatever two of the pitchers, top end pitchers you want. And most importantly, a good secondary stack, good one-offs. Like, this is a team that they still have a 4.5 implied run total. They're in a high upside spot, and you're going to just be able to basically put the nuts around them. So if they go off, you're going to have some very, very good teams, as opposed to, a lot of other teams, they go off and you're looking like, oh, good, I have the $2,500 7 hitter from, this team as a one-off. So you're not going to have that issue with the Angels. So I do like getting to them.
I don't mind going to the Rangers either. They're not really pulling any ownership. The implied total looks fine. And Packy Naughton is on the hill across from them. So I like getting to this game just in general.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm hoping I get less Texas than I did earlier. But sure. Just for in the crunch that I ran basically right after the strategy show this morning, the Angels were my highest owned stack on DraftKings and Texas was third. So I certainly don't mind getting to this game.
Absolutely. Anything else for Texas or Los Angeles?
Nope.
Royals and Indians, 4.5 run implied total for Kansas City, 4.3 for Cleveland. Brady Singer and Aaron Savali. It's time to have an even bigger conversation than we had earlier today. We have Brady Singer 19% owned for today. I just don't get it. So I need you to try to figure it out.
So I didn't get it this morning. I think I get it a little bit more now, just after crunching lineups. I think it's just a price thing. I think that he is good enough. It's an average spot. The Indians are essentially an average offense. Singer is, I'll say, an average pitcher in terms of his results, but he's got above average stuff. He's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He's likely, he's somebody that can go out there and really put together good starts if he's on. But when you look at the pitching pricing today, Logan Webb is $8,900 on DraftKings. Then you get a $600 drop to Singer. There's not really much else there. You have Urquidy at 8,600 against Tampa. You have Ryu. You have Savali on the other side of this game. Tyon against Toronto. There's nothing there. Like, if you can't afford to get the Logan Webb with your SP2 spot, there's nothing. And so I think that's where Singer is coming from. Like, when I crunched lineups this morning, I think I got around like 12, 13%, which I was surprised by, except for I just sort of realized he fits in. He's a good enough pitcher. So not somebody that I'm going out of my way to get to, but I think he does just kind of have a role in this slate because he's like the cheapest. Well, he's not the cheapest viable option. I think that would be like Ronaldo Lopez, but he's the cheapest. He's just in a price tier by himself, I guess, is the way I would word it.
I'd rather have Ryu in a scary spot.
I'm good.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, if one of them's 1% owned and the other one's 19, give
okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I wasn't like thinking in terms of ownership. Yeah, that's fine.
No. You need to check my DM, by the way. I'm not going to be getting to Aaron Savali at 8,700. It's just not that kind of day for me. But do you have any Savali interest? How great is that, by the way?
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Do I have any Savali interest? No, not particularly. The case for him, I guess, would be the same as you just made for Ryu. He's 1% owned compared to 30% or 20% owned Singer. But Kansas City, not the easiest team to strike out. Savali himself, not a very good strikeout pitcher. Not really anything to say other than if you're playing 150 lineups, maybe you get a couple Savali.
Do we get to offense here? I see both teams as like relatively neutral. I guess I'm a little bit more interested in Cleveland just because Brady Singer is in 1/5 of all lineups. But I'm guessing that I'm just relatively muted for both sides. Neither team is like an outstanding offense, and this isn't the best park for power.
Yeah, it's kind of just middle of the road for me. I think if the slate were a little bit smaller, I'd be a little bit more interested. I do have respect for Singer as a pitcher overall. Certainly never going to be upset about getting to Ramirez or Reyes. You do get a very cheap Harold Ramirez and Bradley Zimmer hitting 5.6. That potentially pushes them up a little bit, but overall, not a whole lot of interest for me in either offense.
This is incredible. Favorite hitter in this game? It's a very interesting question. If you had to one off, who's it going to be?
I mean, ideally it would be Ramirez, but factoring in price, I would say probably Benintendi. Actually, no, it's probably like Bradley Zimmer.
Okay.
Just punting it with a guy that has some power and speed.
Harold Ramirez for 2,400. I don't mind too much. It's probably my answer. Either way, weird game. I don't have anything else for Royals in Cleveland.
No, me neither.
Promo time, everybody. MLB Deeper Dive. One gigantic word. You get an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. Access to everything. projections, ownership, premium Slack, lineup builder, top stacks, top pitchers, top stacks again, top golfers, top fighters. We have all sorts of different tools that you would get access to behind the paywall if you use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. Just because it says MLB in the title doesn't mean you're only getting it for baseball. It covers everything. Again, $29.95. You can see it on the screen. That is the code that you should use. Sign up, stop guessing, and start winning. We're on to game number 8. White Sox and Reds, 5.1 run implied total for the White Sox, 3.9 for the Reds. Ronaldo Lopez and Riley O'Brien. Do you pay down with Riley O'Brien? Do you go to Ronaldo Lopez at 7,300? Those are my questions.
Mostly my answer is no. O'Brien, I don't have any interest in. This is his major league debut. His minor league numbers are not particularly, don't make me particularly optimistic. Lopez, I think at 7,300, sort of like I was saying with Brady Singer, he's at a price point where there's not a whole lot around him that I want to get to either. He's getting 7% ownership, but the issue is it's unlikely he goes really deep into this game. We haven't seen that from him, at all. Recently, he's thrown in his most recent start, he threw 65 pitches, 81 pitches in 4 innings, 90 pitches in 5 innings, 3 starts ago, 65 in 4 the start before that. It's kind of a spot where, if he gives you 5 innings, you're going to feel pretty good about it. It's an okay matchup here against Cincinnati. If you need a $7,300 pitcher, Lopez is fine, but not going out of my way to get there. But yeah, no interest in O'Brien for me.
Lots of interest for me in these White Sox bats who are not pulling very much ownership. This is my number 3 leverage stack and my number 5 stack overall. Talk to me about Chicago against Riley O'Brien.
I think there is a massive ceiling for them here against this guy. He's, like I said, making his major league debut. He pitched in 23 games at AAA this year, 22 starts, 112 innings pitched, decent strikeout numbers, 24.7%, had a 4.61 xFIP, allowed 1.28 home runs per 9. The reason that I think the ceiling is really high is that I don't really think this guy is a highly regarded prospect. Like, he's almost 27 years old. This is the first time he's getting to the major leagues. This was his first year at AAA. So he's old for the league. Like, it's one thing when, you're 22 and struggling a little bit or putting up, mediocre numbers at AAA. It's different when you're almost 27. You're supposed to be in the big leagues by then if you're any good. So there's that. But then the strikeout numbers were okay at 24.7%, but he walked 11.2% of hitters. Typically, the biggest or one of the biggest differences between the major leagues and AAA is that major league hitters just have better plate discipline. They're much, much better at not swinging at pitches they shouldn't. And so if you're walking 11+% of hitters at AAA with most likely mediocre stuff based on his strikeout percentage, I think there's a really good chance that you're going to step into this start against a very good White Sox offense and not only be walking guys, but just be working behind the counts where it's very, very favorable for the hitters and they can sit fastball and have success. So, obviously no guarantees, but I think that the White Sox are in a very, very good spot just based on my read of what O'Brien's likely to be like at the major league level.
Yeah, I'm going to have a lot of this one. I just don't see a way around it. Grandal at 4,800, definitely the bell of the ball for me, but anything in this core, Lubob, Abreu, Grandal, Jimenez, Moncada, that's a great spot across the board. Very easy to get to, I think, as well. So, and I'd even mentioned Tim Anderson hitting leadoff, but he's just sort of like appropriately priced. Love getting to the White Sox. Do you want to get to the Reds by any chance against Lopez?
No, not particularly. Okay. Schrock at 2,500 is fine. Obviously, Votto's always fine. So is Castellanos. But there's just so many spots I really do like on this slate.
All righty. Then let's move on to Astros and Rays. Very interesting game here. 4.9 run implied total for the Stros. 4.3 for the Rays. Jose Urquidy and Michael Wacha. No one's owning Wacha at 6,600. No one's really owning Urquidy at 8,600. And I think that's pretty reasonable. I'll have a little bit, but nothing crazy. It's just too difficult of a matchup for today. How are you feeling about Urquidy?
Tough spot. Not a great pitcher, I don't think. Like, he's okay, but below average strikeout stuff. 21.4% strikeout percentage, 4.29 xFIP is okay, 1.3 home runs per 9. Just not really a slate that I want to get to him against a very, very dangerous Tampa Bay offense. They do offer some strikeout upside just because of the hitters in their lineup. But the concern for me is that Urquidy's not someone that's very good at getting strikeouts. So I think it's more likely that you see Tampa Bay putting the ball in play powerfully than Urquidy just piling up strikeouts against this team.
I have a little bit of interest in the Rays. fully unowned. They're like the lesser version of Toronto and the Yankees for me. I don't like them as much. The pricing isn't as advantageous, but I'm going to get to some 5-mans of the Rays. Just not nearly as many as I thought I was going to get to earlier. Are you going to get to the Rays or the Astros bats?
I'm interested in both sides. I didn't get to that much earlier, but I do think they're both good plays at their respective ownership levels. Like I was just saying about Urquidy, he's not someone that misses a lot of bats. And I think that sets up pretty nicely for Tampa Bay from an upside perspective. If you're going to let guys like Lau and Franco and Cruz and Meadows and Rosarena hit the ball, a lot of times good things happen if you stack them. So I do like them at low ownership. And then on the other side, the Astros are really, really expensive, at least the 1 through 6, the guys that you really want. That's the biggest knock against them. Sort of like we were talking about earlier. You can make decent lineups with a good Astro stack. The problem is that you're going to end up with like the Brady Singer plus Reynaldo Lopez combo or something like that, and then mediocre one-offs around them, while someone else is going to have the low-owned Yankees with 2 of the ace pitchers and good one-offs, and you're going to have to you're competing against that. So the overall lineup, I think, just ends up being better going to cheaper bats. That's the biggest issue I have with the Astros, but I don't think Waka is a particularly good pitcher. He does give up power. So if you can find a way to build an Astro stack that doesn't sacrifice a lot in the way of pitching or one-offs, then by all means, I think it's a good spot to be.
All righty. Do you have a preference on side of this game? Do you think you're more likely to get to Houston or Tampa?
I think I'm more likely to get to Tampa. Salary not considered, I prefer the Houston side, but
sure.
Looking at DraftKings salary, I prefer the Tampa side. I don't have FanDuel salary, and I guess I can pull it up. On FanDuel,
Astros are a little bit more expensive, but they're really cheap at the ass end of the lineup.
Yeah. I mean, they're priced pretty well there too, but I think even they're probably a little bit easier to get to on FanDuel, I would guess, than DraftKings.
Oh, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to be able to send this one to the Rockies and Nats next. And whenever you start talking about the hitters, I'm going to be able to use the restroom quickly because I drank too much of this 50 ounces of water prior to this show, and I'm ready for it. So Colorado Rockies, Washington Nationals, 6.1 run implied total for the Rocks, 5.6 for the Nats. Kyle Freeland and Pat Corbin. Can you roster either pitcher here?
I don't really see it. If hitters were more expensive, I could see getting to some Freeland, but again, I just don't really think it's necessary on the slate.
That's good enough for me. So let's start here. The Colorado Rockies are my number 1 stack. They are also my biggest negative leverage stack. The Nats are third. We'll deal with them in a bit. How do you want to manage Colorado, who's got 4 separate guys at last look? Let me grab this updated ownership that we got about 14 minutes ago. Pop this in here just to see. Okay, so they actually went down a little bit in ownership. Nothing too crazy, but we have Hampson and Story both over 30%. We've got Brendan Rodgers and CJ Cron both at 28%. The ownership to the Nats is very interesting, but just start with Colorado. What are you looking to do with the Rockies given their heavy ownership?
Yeah, some of the absolute best value bats on the slate. I don't think that's really debatable. Patrick Corbin hasn't been good this season. He's pitching in Coors Field. He doesn't strike right-handed hitters out. He gives up a lot of power. 228 expected ISO, only a 16.8% strikeout percentage. CJ Cron in particular at 3,600, I think is the ownership aside, the best play on the slate. If you're playing cash and on DraftKings and people don't have $3,600 CJ Cron, only a few days left in the season, but get a second mortgage, play them for as much as you can over the next couple of days. So he really stands out. Hampson leading off at 2,800 on a team with a 6.5 implied run total is clearly going to look good in cash games. So is Rodgers, so is Story, so is Diaz. Some of the best just point per dollar options. The issue is that they are getting massive amounts of ownership, as you would assume. And this is still a 13-game slate. Colorado has the second highest top stack percentage right now. I'm assuming it's going to go up a little bit before lock, but still, like an 11 to 12% chance of being the top stack. So you're still talking 88 to 89% chance that they aren't. This is still an offense that isn't all that good overall. So in tournaments, I think using them as one-offs, using them as mini stacks to fill out your lower own lineups makes sense. I'm a little more hesitant to go to full 5-man stacks because that's just it's setting up 50% of my lineup to be very, very popular no matter what I do.
We need to have a conversation here about the Washington Nationals, who are not really chalky or owned. Lane Thomas in double digits at 16%. Juan Soto, a properly owned 16%. Everybody else is in single digits. Did the Nats just become more interesting?
I think so, because they yeah, they're not quite as appealing as the Rockies are, but they're a team that's difficult to strike out. They're in Coors Field. I think Kyle Freeland's a pretty good pitcher. He typically does a good enough job of limiting damage. 4.13 xFIP, 4.5 ERA this year, but 1.58 home runs per nine, only about a 21% strikeout percentage. Lane Thomas leading off at 4,100 looks really good. Soto is really expensive, but also he's Juan Soto. You have Zimmerman batting cleanup. You have Keibert Ruiz batting fifth. So more expensive than Diaz on the other side, but another Coors Field catcher batting fifth that you can go to. And then the bottom of the order is cheap. Yadiel Hernandez, Carter Kieboom in particular standing out. So I do like getting to the Nats at lower ownership, even though I like the Rockies matchup better. The ownership is just far and away going to the Rockies instead of the Nats.
Yeah, this is going to be a really weird one. I didn't expect to get to the Nats heavily, at least from a 5-man perspective, earlier today. I think that's going to change now after this show, and I can start running some crunches. I really like this Washington side if they're going to be like fully unowned. Although 5,200 for Alcides Escobar is such a tough sell. It's so gross. But at the same time, like if it's part of a stack, it's part of a stack, but that is not a cost efficient player there whatsoever. Who's your favorite bat in this game that isn't CJ Cron? Look at me listening while I go to the restroom too.
From a value standpoint, Garrett Hampson leading off. From a tournament standpoint, I think Lane Thomas at 4,100.
All righty. Mine's probably Ruiz.
Yeah, that's fine. He's been straight garbage in the majors, but he's a highly regarded prospect.
Yeah. Wow, 12% K rate via Steamer. Not that matters all that much for this one, but yeah, by the way, yeah.
Actually, Jordan, I take that back. I guess it speaks to sample sizes. I looked at Ruiz's, happened to look at his like actual numbers like a week ago, and I was like, oh, he's been terrible. Now he has a 102 WRC plus.
There we go. Yeah, Jordan, I don't know what you did, but Nightbot is going bonkers in chat today. So kudos to you on that one. Oh, well, look, he's got a 105 projected weighted runs created plus via Steamer. So it looks like he's spot on. News God asking, did I just say that I was listening and using the restroom? Yes, absolutely. I have my earbuds in. I walked to the can, cleared out some space, came back. Very easy. He never let diapers, baby. You guys don't utilize diapers the way that I do. It's so much easier than having to use a toilet. Just poops and pees in the same place over and over again. Or it's going to be like Idiocracy, and this chair just has like a toilet seat in it. If only. Under the desk coat. Yeah, ultra long catheter. We plenty of ways that we can go with this one. But instead, I'm going to hit you with two props from the sponsor, Prize Picks. Are you ready? This is definitely the segment they were looking for.
Nice lead in. So
Prize Picks is offering daily prop contests, and they want to help you get started with a deposit bonus. You can use the promo code Awesemo to get up to $100 of an instant match deposit bonus on that first deposit. And all you're doing is just picking the players available on the board to go over or under their scores. You can pick 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. If you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10 times your entry fee, whether it's NBA, MLB, WNBA, NFL, esports. That all works. So now I have to ask you, since we're just got done talking about Rockies and Nats, Trevor Story, over under 8 fantasy points.
Over.
Yeah. Pretty easily, I might add. Your boy, CJ Cron, over under 27 fantasy points.
Stand by my statement.
It's actually 7.
Yeah, just absolute over. I'll pull it up now too, just because it's related. But I read them off this morning, and obviously they don't mean the most, but just to get an idea for how absurd this price tag is. And I already mentioned how much Corbin has struggled and all of that. This year in Coors Field, 447 WOBA, 341 ISO for CJ Cron against left-handed pitching, just overall, not only in Coors Field, 416 WOBA, 279 ISO against left-handed pitching in Coors Field, 526 ISO, 526 WOBA, 455 ISO.
So what you're telling me is he's a terrible play.
0 for 5 with 6 strikeouts.
Yeah. He just gets an extra one out of spite. Oh, that's going to be, I mean, if we're being honest, so we'll see where we end up with the Nats, but like I would like the Colorado Rockies to score precisely 0 runs, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to end up getting a lot of CJ Cron, even if I don't get a lot of Rockies.
I hope it'd be a lot more fun if you shipped baseball today with no CJ Cron and you're just like, I ended up going a different direction after the deeper dive.
5-man Rocky stack without Cron.
That would be great. All right. Giants and Diamondbacks. We've got 3 more games to go here. 4.9 run implied total for the Giants, 3.1 for the Diamondbacks. Logan Webb and Luke Weaver. Webb is 26% owned. It feels like a tad high, but in the grand scheme of things, this is a great park. This is a bad Diamondbacks team. I'm going to be getting to Logan Webb, and I'm happy to.
Yeah, right there with you. Diamondbacks are a pretty favorable matchup. They've been a below average offense all season long. They're hitting in an extremely pitcher friendly park. You've gotten sort of mixed results from Logan Webb recently, but overall he's been extremely good this year. He actually has the lowest xFIP on the slate. He has struck out 26.2% of hitters, 0.6 home runs per 9. He's discounted compared to all of the other top end starters. So yeah, really, really like Logan Webb here.
Hard not to. What do you want to do with Luke Weaver at 7K?
I don't know that I'll get to any. If I do get to some, it won't be much. The only real case I would make for Weaver, and I made it this morning, and then once I made lineups, I realized it wasn't even that necessary. But if you need a 7K pitcher or someone in that price range, Lopez is the guy getting the ownership. He's getting 7.5%, so it's not even like it's a crazy amount. But Weaver's getting none. It's not like Lopez is a good pitcher that is likely to go deep into this game. So between the two of them, if you're getting 7-1 odds on Luke Weaver, I would take Weaver. But like if you need to save ownership, if your lineup's popular. But that being said, I'm not going to get that many lineups that even need a pitcher in that price range. And 7% ownership for Lopez is still plenty low enough.
Let's talk Giants bats. They are my number 10 stack, 13th in leverage. Doesn't feel like a spot that I'm going to get to all that much, but they do have a really nice implied total. So I'm curious if you like the Giants.
Yeah, they were another one of those teams that I got to a lot of this morning. And if that happens going into lock, I'm perfectly fine with it because they're not getting much ownership. They do have a lot of power in this lineup. I think the matchup is okay. Weaver is, I think, an okay pitcher, but he does give up some power. 203 expected ISO to righties with a 27% strikeout percentage, only a 15% strikeout percentage to lefties with a 184 expected ISO. You're not going to have Brandon Belt tonight for the Giants, which sucks. He broke his thumb, but you're going to get a cheap Tommy La Stella, most likely leading off. The team as a whole isn't that expensive. The only guys above 5K on DraftKings are Chris Bryant and Brandon Crawford at 5,100. You're potentially going to get a $2,500 Wilmer Flores in there. So I do like the Giants. Again, I don't know if I end up getting as much as I got this morning, where they were my second highest stack, I think, after the Angels. But if they are, I'll be fine with that. I think it's it's a good enough spot. It's a good enough offense that even though I think Weaver's, a decent pitcher, I'm not going to be upset if I get to an offense this good at basically no ownership.
I am not going to be upset if I don't get to the Diamondbacks. That much I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm good on that one. Calhoun's 2,300. I guess that's worthy of a mention, but I don't have really anything to say there. Lowest implied run total on the slate, I believe.
I have it as the lowest. Yeah.
Yeah, slightly behind the Padres.
Yes. Cardinals are third for me. I got nothing else for Giants and D-backs. So let's go to Mariners and A's. 3.9 run implied total for the Mariners, 4.1 for the A's. Tyler Anderson and Chris Bassett. Anderson 7,400, Bassett 8,500. Neither pitcher getting owned. I would have liked to roster Chris Bassett, but I just don't think he goes deep enough in this game.
Yeah, I don't think he does either. He threw 48 pitches in 3 innings his last time out. If this were a smaller slate or a slate with just, complete dumpster fire pitching, if this were like yesterday's early slate where, I think I had tons of Jackson Kowar just because I didn't want to play popular Quantrill and there was like no other good pitching other than some rookie for the Reds. If it's a slate like that, I would take my chances that maybe Bassett can get it done in 70 pitches against the Mariners, but it's just really, really hard to figure out what the slate looks like where Chris Bassett ends up being a tournament winning pitcher at $8,500 when you have Logan Webb, Walker Buehler, Chris Sale, Yu Darvish, Woodruff, Wheeler, all these guys on the slate. I feel pretty comfortable saying if Chris Bassett is in a GPP winning lineup tonight, it doesn't have to do with what Chris Bassett did. It has to do with just the fact that he's in some random lineup that scored a ton of points with their hitters, and he happened to be there.
Yeah, he showed up in 2% of my stuff. I can't really justify it. So if we talk bats here, I think we're only going to really be talking about.
Hang on. I really want the answer to whether Sean V thinks Corbin wanted to suck for the rest of this season.
Wait, what?
Corbin's final start of the year, I don't think he really wants to go out sucking. The Rockies are cold, if you haven't noticed. One, no, I haven't noticed. Two, I just really would like to know if Corbin really wanted to suck up until September 28th.
You think you can just control that? Like, I don't want to suck tonight. I'm going to be a Cy Young Award winner, but every other game, I hope I just eat shit constantly. What are we talking about here? You wonder why we roll this guy during shows. Like, what are we like? That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. If he can control it, he'd just continue to be good.
Wait, the Cards really going for 17 straight wins?
I don't know.
That's what someone just said in chat. That's awesome if they are. They've been hitting the hell out of the ball. I know that.
Yeah, I would never know that. I'm looking it up now. That's the NBA.
Someone in chat said yes, so I'm believing them.
Yeah, they've won 16 straight. Clueless, dude. Clueless.
I guess that's what happens when you have a 114 WRC plus over the last month and a half.
They were 71 and 69. And they are now 87 and 69.
What happens when you had good locker room presences like Jay Happ and John Lester?
That's bonkers, dude. What's really crazy, 16-game win streak. They're now 34 runs positive, which means that at the beginning of this, they were above 500 and most certainly not in run differential. Huh. Like, if I said, how many games in a row do you think the Cardinals have won? But it didn't feel like I prompted you with that question before this. Would you just be like, I don't know, 3?
Yes. Somewhere between 0 and like 25. I don't know.
It's just, like, you just naturally guess a super low that's never 16.
Right.
I don't know. Anyway.
It's like when the Orioles lost 22 in a row or whatever the hell they did.
I don't remember that, but it's way easier to remember the bad beats.
Yeah. They've done it twice this year. I think like 18 and 19 games or something.
Congrats to you on that one.
Yeah. They're tied with the Diamondbacks for the worst record. I know that.
Does DraftKings have a box at Baltimore games? You probably could have went for the entire season.
Yeah. I've been a few times. I didn't go this year though.
Might as well. You know? That's fair.
Probably thought they would offend me if they asked.
Oakland Bats?
Sure, but also probably not. Like, it's another one of those teams where I think that they're under-owned relative to how much power and how much upside they have. It's not one that I think I'm particularly likely to get to. I think I would get to the Giants before them. I think I'd get to that Angels game. I think I'd get to the Jays game. I think I'd get to the Blue Jays game. So for me personally, probably not getting there. But if you're watching it and you're just like, yeah, I don't know, I want to take chances on the A's here. Tyler Anderson is a middle of the road pitcher. The A's have tons of power in their lineup, may or may not have Starling Marte today. That makes a difference. But yeah, if you want to go there, I think it's another team that's fine. The payoffs when the A's do well at 1% look very, very good. They are a team that puts the ball in play. They have tons of power. They're almost always a good team to stack at low ownership. It's just that today there's a lot of teams that I think are good to stack at low ownership, and I have several of them ahead of the A's.
Mariners? Don't think that's going to be the one.
That's a really tough sell for me because it's not like Bassett's going to get any ownership, but he is good. I guess the biggest selling point would be that the A's bullpen tends to struggle. So you could just get some late runs from the Mariners, but this isn't really a slate that I'm looking to chase that.
Can Crone one off? Sure, but he'll probably be chalk. And we have great pivots like Bobby Dalbec.
Yeah, he probably will be chalk. He should be chalk.
Yeah.
You don't have to have low-owned guys at every position in your lineup.
No, you do not. Dodgers and Padres, 4.3 run implied total for the Dodgers, 3.2 for the Pods. Walker Buehler and Yu Darvish. Yes, Yu Darvish, without any question at all. It is Yu Darvish. Buehler, 13% owned. Darvish at just 4. I would like to have slightly more of both guys. How do you want to handle pitching?
That's where I'm at as well. I don't particularly like the matchup for either guy, but with how much good pitching there is on this slate, I'm really hesitant to get contrarian, like completely off the board at pitching with guys that like aren't even remotely in the same ballpark in terms of talent. So I'm more willing to go to guys that have a little bit more difficult matchups, but are still really good. You know, Walker Buehler has been one of the best pitchers in the National League this year, 25.5% strikeout percentage, 3.64 xFIP. The Padres are, or have been a pretty average-ish offense. The top is scary. The bottom is a little bit less scary. Still some decent hitters down there, but you're really just saying, okay, Buehler averages nearly 7 innings per start, goes almost as deep in the games as Zach Wheeler does. He's a good strikeout pitcher. He's a good pitcher overall. It's not like it would surprise anybody if Walker Buehler has a good start, regardless of what you think of the Padres offense. And he's still getting some ownership, but he's getting less than a lot of the pitchers around them. He's getting less than Morton. He's getting like a third of Chris Sale. So I think he's a reasonable pivot. And then Darvish, an even worse matchup than Buehler, going up against this Dodgers team that just they have a lot of guys that are tough to strike out, a lot of guys that hit really, really well. But at the same time, 3 or 4% ownership going to Darvish. He has the second highest, or he's tied with Wheeler for the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 29.2%. It tells you how high his ceiling is if he's pitching well. He's not particularly likely to pitch well here. He's probably going to have a mediocre start because the Dodgers are really good. They have a 4.4 implied run total. It's not going to pay off all that frequently. But if you're going to some of the better bats on the slate that are popular, if you're using the Rockies or you're using the Red Sox or whatever, some of these teams that we've been skeptical of the ownership, one of the easiest ways to still get a very high ceiling, but mitigate some of the ownership of your bats is to just put Yu Darvish in there and hope that Yu Darvish happens to have one of those games where he just strikes out everyone. Not particularly likely to happen, but will happen. But it'll happen often enough at his current ownership projection that I think he makes some sense.
I don't really see a scenario where I'm going to be getting to Dodgers bats or Padres bats. It's not like I'd be upset getting to Dodgers bats. It just doesn't seem like the day is today. So cue them going crazy, but this doesn't feel like a game where we can get it to any offense.
That's where I am too. I kind of put the Dodgers in that same boat with like the Athletics, where if I submit my lineups and I look and I'm like, oh, I have a good amount of Dodgers, I'll be fine with that because it's the Dodgers at very low ownership. But there's a pretty long list of teams that aren't getting much ownership that I would rather get to before I get to the Dodgers. Someone said in chat, does Darvish give up enough power to make the Dodgers viable? Yeah, he's allowed 1.5 home runs per 9 this year. The Dodgers are pretty much, they create their own power anyway. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, they're always viable. It's just a matter of on a 13-game slate having to kind of draw the line somewhere between, like, I'm not going to play every team or every pitcher or every play that I think is viable on a slate this big.
Anybody else you want to talk about here? Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here and turn it over to the Live Before Lock crew?
No, I think that's about it. I think it's a pretty wide open tournament slate. Like, there's so much good pitching that none of that ownership is crazy. There's a couple really, really popular offenses, but then there's a lot of good low owned offenses. I think you can kind of just do whatever you want as far as, there's low owned pitching options you can roll the dice on if you want more popular bats or vice versa. So I think it's a pretty fun one.
All righty. That will do it, everybody. Don't go anywhere. Stay right on this stream. Live Before Lock is coming up next. And hit that like button if you can. Let's run that number up before the boys get in here for Live Before Lock. Good luck tonight, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. We'll be back again tomorrow morning doing it all once again. We'll talk to you later.
Jordan Klein, just the worst producer in the game. Pitch dark hands. There we go. Cool. Can't see anything. Can't see a thing. Whatever. We're going to go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Live Before Lock show. I'm Eric Lindquist. Today, we're presented by Prize Picks. Good times are had by all. Excited to talk about them here a little bit in the show, but we just got done everything. I mean, chat has just been fantastic today. I'm not even going to lie, but I'm having a blast. I think Greg Ehrenberg over there is having a blast too. He's back in the baseball streets, helping you guys with everything you need to know on this 13 gamer. Greg, how you doing, my dude?
Yeah, it's been a busy day. I've been doing shows, but I've been doing other meetings, planning other stuff that we have coming on. Also, Jordan trying to get us like some sort of copyright violation before we started, where he's got his TV blaring. He watched some god awful reality TV show, and it's so it was so loud that I'm sure the mute button probably didn't even work. Like people were probably even here even with themselves muted because that was terrible.
I mean, Jordan Klein is the last 48 hours have not been a good 48 hours for Jordan Klein and I's relationship. That's for sure. The guy is just on ultimate troll mode. He thinks I'm Butthole Jenkins. I'm not Butthole Jenkins. Look at this. The guy's just posting all day and hands are away from the computer, but whatever. Hit that like button. I don't know. Josh Engelman getting a little weak on the like button. I think we need to get that count up there. So as we're getting going, please hit that. We've got just a little bit over an hour here until lock, and then hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We'll talk about our sponsor Prize Picks here in a little bit, but we got to get to this. We got a lot to talk about here, starting with pitcher, like we always do on the Live Before Lock show. Greg, we've got Zach Wheeler. We've got Brandon Woodruff. Both are pulling, a number of ownership up here on the top end. They're your two pitchers that are above 10K on DraftKings today. How are you playing? What are you doing with those two specifically?
Yeah, well, one thing also is there isn't a crazy amount of ownership really going anywhere at the top of the pitcher range. There's a handful of guys that are relatively popular, but they're grouped pretty closely together. That being Zach Wheeler, Brandon Woodruff, Logan Webb, Chris Sale. These are all guys who are 25 to 30% owned. And, I'm not really looking at it with a slate this size as being anything really problematic in terms of what the ownership is. Another thing to consider, too, is there's a very good spot to stack today at Coors Field that's just way underpriced, and it's not picking up that much ownership either. We have that being under-owned, so you could kind of make an under-owned Coors 5-man stack pay up for pitching. It seems too simple, except it all works out according to our numbers.
I'm right there with you. I mean, it's exciting when you get some of these lower-owned spots here. Colorado is gaining a bunch of ownership, but I mean, for the most part, comparatively.
So I meant Washington.
Washington is who I thought you were talking about. Yeah. That's what I assumed it to be. But yeah, we're going to be looking at getting to some Washington bats, almost like we should be playing Juan Soto in Coors Field or something like that. I'm right there with you. I think the Washington side is where we want to be looking at from Coors Field. Colorado getting a ton of ownership, probably rightfully so. And I think that'll be where I'm looking at my Prize Picks plays from. A little bit of leverage for myself on the day, but looking at the rest of this pitching board, I know that on the last show, we had Adam talking a little bit about Chris Sale being a guy he's high on. And I mean, that number, 9,400 for Chris Sale against Baltimore, I'm still not even sure what I want to do with it here. And we're an hour until then. Do you have any kind of a lean on which direction we should be going with him? And then Logan Webb, who's also 8,900, pulling a bunch of ownership. I believe he's one of the better plays over on FanDuel just because he's at that 9K number, highest owned pitcher there besides Brady Singer, which I don't even want to talk about. Talk to me about this upper end of 9K pitcher.
Yeah, so let's talk about let's loop all these guys in together because we haven't really talked too deep into Zach Wheeler, Brandon Woodruff. But first, I think let's talk about at the top end too, who our overall favorite cash game plays are, and then we can talk about it from a tournament purpose as well. For cash games, I'm most inclined to get to, I guess, Chris Sale and Logan Webb, just because those are the two guys with the easiest matchups. Brandon Woodruff pitching on the road in St. Louis. That's a little bit problematic given how well the Cardinals are playing. Also, that the Brewers just don't have anything to play for at this point. So I don't know that they really need to pitch Brandon Woodruff 100 plus pitches today. And then Zach Wheeler, also a pretty tough matchup on the road in Atlanta. So just from that standpoint, the two guys from a cash standpoint that stand out the most be Logan Webb and Chris Sale. I think those are the two safest plays over on DK. And then for FanDuel, I think it's just Logan Webb at home. He's cheaper than all those other guys. Favorable matchup against the Diamondbacks. We've got him at 9K, Wheeler 10.7, Woodruff 10.2, Sale 10,000. So just given the price discount we're getting on Logan Webb there, I think he's the number one cash option on FanDuel.
I agree with you. That's definitely going to be my guy over there. He's going to be my highest owned pitcher, I think, over on FanDuel. Allows me to get to more of the bats that I want to, and I'm playing quite a bit on both sites here today. Good times had by all here. Kind of working our way down the rest of this board. Who's really sticking out to you ownership wise in terms of savings? Is there somebody that you're just a little bit higher on than the field? Somebody that you're lower on as we're working our way down?
So any kind of price range at all?
Yeah. So upper eights. I mean, we're lower nines, we're upper eights. We're kind of still sticking in that spot.
It's tough. Like I overall, I think this is a really good slate to pay up for pitching, and there aren't too many cheaper options I really like. Now, there are some guys that we could point to as kind of being like, hey, here's a low owned Yu Darvish today. And is there sense to playing a low owned Yu Darvish? Kind of, when he's 3.8%, but I don't feel great about him. Walker Buehler also, he's really struggled. 9,100. If I had to go to one guy for a little bit less for ownership, I guess I would gravitate towards Walker Buehler just because he's had such a good season overall. And have we gotten the Padres lineup yet?
I'm pulling it up here. Let's take a look. No, we have not yet.
Okay. Yeah, that was before we had started. I knew that lineup hadn't come out yet, but the Padres also have nothing to play for at this point of the season. And there was an argument to made too, like, hey, maybe Fernando Tatis, maybe they're just going to keep running him out there because they want to try to get him MVP votes. But he's kind of fallen out of the MVP mix too. It's kind of really been Bryce Harper now, and Juan Soto actually is the second favorite in terms of the betting odds. And it's Juan Soto who leads all the National League position players and wins above replacement overall in the National League. I have to bring this up because of my biases. It is Corbin Burns who leads all of the National League and wins above replacement. But in terms of MVP voting, Tatis has kind of taken a step back, and at least odds-wise, it's Harper and Juan Soto as the two guys. And I kind of wonder if we're just going to start to see some days where the Padres just kind of rest everybody, where there's maybe no Tatis, no Machado, and just a really watered-down version of the lineup. So just for that reason, I think Walker Buehler is somebody who I'm going to really be looking at for lower ownership here. He's only projected for 13% ownership on DK. On FanDuel, we have Buehler projected for 3% ownership. So that's a little bit light to me, but the safer options are definitely the ones who are picking up a little more ownership.
Sure. And if you want, Logan Webb pulling 26.1% ownership. I mean, $200, if you have $200, which, a lot of lineups are going to have left on the table, and you get later into the night, that makes for an easy pivot in the event that you do see the San Diego lineup come out later, or in the event that you just need to try to get away from something to try to get a little bit different in order to cash some lineups. Little late swap advantage that might exist there in that late window. So just kind of keep that on your radar. I always love when those kind of opportunities present themselves. Obviously, they present themselves a lot more in NBA more than anything else. And NFL has been pretty good for it here this season. It seems like people didn't want to pivot off the cup chalk. Probably pretty good chalk. We're not even going to go there. Good times. Let's work our way down into this 8K range. As you said, 9K range is awesome. Are you getting to Savali, Urquidy, Bassett? I'm getting to none of these guys. And Brady Singer, he's obviously going to be a massive talking point. But before we do, anybody else just below Logan Webb that you're getting to at all?
Yes, but there's also guys who I think who are a little bit too popular. Charlie Morton is 13% projected ownership right now on DK 8,600. He's in a price point where I think that if you're going down there, he's sensible, but I think it's a little bit too much ownership going to Charlie Morton at 13%. We have him with a 6.1% chance to be a top 2 scoring pitcher on the slate. And if I'm going to go a little bit more contrarian, I'd rather just go to Yu Darvish at a similar price point. So Yu Darvish, we have with a 5.6% chance to be a top 2 scoring pitcher on the slate. Charlie Morton, 6.1%, but yet we have Yu Darvish only projected for 2% ownership currently on DK. And 2% on FanDuel, 13% for Charlie Morton on FanDuel. And then looking at the price point over on DK, it's same odds of being a top scoring pitcher, but 4% ownership for Darvish, 19% for Morton. So that's somebody that I think is a pretty good pivot, is getting to Yu Darvish for less ownership. But it's also pretty hard to feel good about Yu Darvish when, number one, he's a brutal matchup against the Dodgers, and number two, he's generally sucked in the second half of the season. So once again, there's other guys that are much higher priority plays for me at the high end of the pricing range.
Same here. All right, let's get to a talking point on this slate, because I know Josh had also kind of brought him up on the last show, and it's a guy that I think I have 0% of. And normally when I'm playing a number of lineups, I'm still going to get to some shares of guys that generally garner some popularity. I'm not playing Brady Singer today. I would rather play the entire field up and down, different directions. then play a 20% guy that I just do not believe in whatsoever. Looking at his numbers for the season, 22.5% K percentage does limit some hard contact. But I mean, this Cleveland team has a number of bats that can actually get it done in that regard. I mean, not just Jose Ramirez, Framil Reyes, but you've got guys, Zimmer in the platoon, Harold Ramirez, Miles Straw sucks. But like looking at some of these guys, I feel as though I would just rather get to the Cleveland side of it on this slate and get some leverage that way. How are you handling Brady Singer on this slate?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird ownership, right? Because he's 20% owned. And if he was like 6,500, 7,000, then I think you could really say, hey, there aren't that many cheap pitchers to go to. He makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's not that cheap, though, at 8,300 a matchup against Cleveland. And like you said, Brady Singer's not been particularly great this year. He's been all right. He's a 4.72 ERA, 4.5 expected ERA, 4.02 FIP. The strikeout rate for him, 22.5%. That's also acceptable. But I know that we're all down on Yu Darvish, who I brought up before. But do we really think do we really think Brady Singer is that much better than Yu Darvish? And they're priced similarly. And I just think there's so much bias baked in here to where we look at the pitcher ownerships projected for today. And we have Brady Singer at 20% at 8,300 compared to Yu Darvish, who's 9,300 on DK. So only $1,000 more for Darvish. And he's a sixth of the ownership. So I think that Brady Singer, like you said, is going way over owned today. And I don't really see a real need that we have to get to him on the slate. It's not like you offer some kind of crazy salary savings. It's a big enough slate where there's enough value hitters. And then on top of that also, he's not that much cheaper than the other high-end pitchers I actually really like today.
It's absurd. It's one of the stranger things that I can remember looking at on the slate here. As we work our way down, though, Hyun-Jin Ryu, I'm not going to get to whatsoever here in this spot against the Yankees. Definitely have some Yankees interest. Patrick Corbin, you're the guy who likes to play some pitchers in Coors Field. Something tells me you're not going to be playing Patrick Corbin, though. Just a guess here. Tyler Anderson pulling no ownership. The next guy who's getting anything considerable is Reynaldo Lopez. This 7K range specifically, working down from the 8K number of Hyun-Jin Ryu. What are you doing here?
Yeah, there's nobody to really like. You could always reason anybody who's sub 1% owned is a reasonable enough dart play. Mm-hmm. But the only guy here that I think is anywhat reasonable is AJ Alexy at 6,300, who's picking up a little bit of ownership, but nothing that's problematic. 4.9%, and it's really more than anything because of that matchup against the Angels, because the Angels' offense has been fairly miserable for most of the season. But Shohei Ohtani isn't even hitting anymore. He is a WRC plus well below 100 over the last couple of months now. And AJ Alexy, who, we have very, very limited amount of information on him, but good strikeout numbers in the minor league. He's facing a team that's prone to striking out a lot. And it's not somebody who I'm saying is a core piece to build around. But if there's one cheap pitcher that I had to roster today, it would be AJ Alexy. And I don't have an issue getting him into like 5 to 10% of lineups. We have him with a 10.4% chance to be one of the top 2 value pitchers on the slate on DK.
Perfect. One of my highest stacks. You like the pitcher on the other side. That's exciting. That'll be a good talking point when we get to that a little bit later here. AJ Alexy down there. Anything else really to talk about? Because I see nothing underneath Alexy. I see really, I don't even want to play Lopez. I mean, I am so concentrated above 8,700. I mean, it's all Logan Webb, Wainwright. I mean, this is one of the more clear-cut spots to be getting to, I think, just to be paying up for pitching. And I don't feel like there's any stacks that I'm really missing out on here on the top end. Do you feel any differently about that?
No, my pitcher exposure is really, I'm looking through it right now, and Logan Webb, Zach Wheeler, Brandon Woodruff, Chris Sale, and then as contrarian options, I have Yu Darvish and Walker Buehler mixed in. But once again, we're talking about 20% Walker Buehler, 15% Yu Darvish. It's not really a massive amount of ownership investment I'm making in those guys. I'm, pretty concentrated at the top. And when we were talking about those high-end pitchers who are popular today, they're popular relative to the other pitchers on the slate, but it's not problematic numbers whatsoever. So we have Zach Wheeler today, for instance, as the number 1 overall pitcher in terms of best odds to be a top 2 scoring pitcher on DK today. We have him projected for 24.2% ownership, 23.3% chance to be a top 2 scoring pitcher on the slate, which is it's good, right? So there's nothing I look at here in terms of these high-end guys and be like, oh, I have to get off the ownership. It's nothing crazy. There's not one guy who's like 40 to 50% owned.
Yeah, the matchup maybe just depreciates that ownership a little bit, but I mean, Zach Wheeler, it's just such a matchup proof guy. I think at this point in time, I'm just happy. I remember talking with one of my buddies from Philly. He's just one of those gross Philadelphia fans. I feel like we have a million of those. We have all Yankee fans and Philly fans, it feels like, here at Awesemo. But my buddy, we've just went back and forth a couple years ago, and I'm just like, I think when you picked up Zach Wheeler from the Mets, I feel like he's a guy that I expect to be better than Nola, and I think that's obviously come to fruition. 28.3% hard hit percentage, 29.2% K percentage. If anybody's going to do really well against Atlanta, he could do really, really well against Atlanta in this spot. And I just feel like the floor is just so good with him. And now there's no ownership going there. One of the more exciting spots for me to go way over the field on a guy like Zach Wheeler and on FanDuel. I mean, on FanDuel, it's not too hard to be building lineups and to be getting up to him on that side either here. I'm playing a little bit more there today than I normally do. Pretty excited about my exposure to Zach Wheeler just being way over top of that 8% number that's existing there. So we're going to kind of move on from pitching so long as you don't see anything else to talk about.
I mean, also Brady Singer, bring him up as a FanDuel option as well. He's a little cheaper on FanDuel, but at least as of now, and let me refresh to make sure this is still the case. And Top Pitchers tool is, by the way, free to use over at Awesemo.com. And I'm refreshing it to make sure I have the most recent run of ownership here. But Brady Singer is projected to be the most popular pitcher on FanDuel by a fairly wide margin. We have Brady Singer projected for 20.5% ownership on FanDuel at 7,700. It really makes no sense to me on a single pitcher site. I would much rather get to Logan Webb, who's picking up almost half the ownership, and he's only $1,300 more expensive. So I don't understand why Brady Singer is that much more that much more popular than Logan Webb. I view Logan Webb as a much better play today.
All right, we got a super chat. Gene B. Kim, the man. He's good at DFS. I'm going to listen to him a lot too. With the Mets not on the main slate, who's going to ruin my night? Greg Ehrenberg, I feel like this is aimed at you.
Oh, I said his wife.
Oh, wow. That is something there.
Fair answer, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Should we just end the show now? That wasn't very nice of you. Okay, well, that's all I got for pitcher. That's all we got for pitcher. And Greg is a bad person, but whatever else. Also, player projections are free. We got producer Jordan Klein, the best producer in the game, named Jordan Klein. I don't know any others. That's the only reason I'm being nice to him in that regard. But check those out as well. In addition to, they're both free. The Top Pitchers tool. We're just going to give you everything for MLB for the most part today, other than the MLB DFS Top Stacks tool. But we'll be referring to that a bunch here in the next segment. But first, Awesemo Plus tools and content for every DFS sport is available right now with a weekly pass for $29.95. Do you want player projections? Do you want ownership projections? How about some premium Slack channel in your life and maybe a lineup builder? Check out all of that for just that $29.95 number. And if you take advantage of promo code MLB Live Before Lock, all caps, one words, right there on the screen, MLB Live Before Lock, 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That is a great deal. Take advantage of that now. Check out every sport we have behind the paywall. NFL. I mean, obviously we've got our guy Dave, who's in and out of chat all the time, and he's just smashing the NFL streets. We've got so many guys that are just putting out fire content constantly, including Greg over there, one of the guys in the in the NFL Pro Plays. We've got NBA coming back next month. Just so madness, truly madness. Everybody's insane in the NBA right now. And MLB DFS right now is only $4.95. Go check out all of that. Stop guessing, start winning, and join us over here on the right side of the paywall. Okay, let's get ourselves to some top stacks. Got to start with Coors. I think that's kind of the right spot to be starting at. And Washington, 1% better top stack percentage, but yet literally 15% less ownership on this slate. Washington's going to be my highest owned stack of the day. I don't think there's any question about it. How about yourself, Greg?
Yeah, we talked about this right at the top about the Coors Field game, where there is a lot of ownership going to Colorado, but it's on the Rocky side, not the Washington side. And Washington, other than Juan Soto and oddly Alcides Escobar is really expensive, $5,200. Juan Soto's price tag warrants it. Alcides Escobar less so. There's nobody who's popular here. We've got Juan Soto. There's nobody who's expensive here. We've got Ryan Zimmerman, 4,400, Lane Thomas leading off at 4,100, Carter Kieboom, 3,500, Yadiel Hernandez, 3,000. It's really easy to stack this team and then just play whatever pitchers you want. And considering the limited amount of ownership that's going here, some ownership going to Juan Soto, some going to Lane Thomas, but nothing that's egregiously problematic. And every other player in the lineup is single-digit ownership. I think that every single player in this lineup, other than maybe Alcides Escobar, warrants getting a more exposure to in the field by a pretty good margin.
Is there anything better than when Sean V disagrees with one of your takes because you know it's the nuts? Like you immediately know, without a shadow of a doubt, that you are in the best possible position. He's saying Coors easy under. Washington is a dumb stack versus Freeland.
Well, here's I've rostered Kyle Freeland a lot this year, and I do overall like Kyle Freeland. But the point is not that I think this is a spot that just guaranteed to crush. It's a Coors Field game where a team is going low owned and they're cheap and they're in Colorado. And generally, look at the pitchers on the slate. What do we want to do with pitching today? We want to pay up for pitching. And it just kind of fits really easily into the build, especially when you consider that the aggregate ownership for the Washington Nationals, it's only a third of what's going to the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies are the most popular team on this slate by a really wide margin. So I think just playing the other side with Washington makes a whole lot of sense. The spot against Kyle Freeland, I agree, it's certainly not ideal, but it's certainly worth it when you consider the price tags and the ownership.
Oh, I love it. I'm just very excited to be playing Washington now. I know I'm going to win all the money, and you are too there in the chat if you're not named Sean B. All right, cool. Let's move ourselves down the board here. Next most popular team is Boston. I find them hard to not have some exposure to. I think there's some ways that you can get some Boston bats, just, for me, a lot of Bobby Dahlbeck one-offs in order to be getting that direction. Somebody at 13.5%, I don't feel so bad getting to some of him. Kyle Schwarber left on left, 6-hole, 4,900. I know that's expensive. I'm getting to some of him on FanDuel and some of those 4-man stacks, but are you getting to Boston whatsoever, considering they are, on the top stacks to another team with 10.9% chance of being a top stack?
Well, they're so popular that I'm kind of underweight everywhere here. And I'm just going to refresh to make sure I'm looking at the most recent top stack odds. But so over on FanDuel, we have them with a 9.6% chance to be the top stack and a 14.4% projected ownership share as a team, which once again, decent enough top stack odds, but they're just way more popular than is warranted. Same thing. If you go over to DraftKings now, 10.5% chance of being a top scoring team on the slate, but 16.6% ownership. So there's 3 teams on this slate that are massively overowned on DK. It is the Colorado Rockies, the Boston Red Sox, and the Minnesota Twins. And just to compare some of the ownership and the odds, we just talked about the Washington Nationals. Well, the Washington Nationals have a 10.9% chance to be the top scoring team of the day in our tools. The Boston Red Sox, 10.5%. So slightly higher on the Nationals, but nothing that's going to drive a lot of decisions there. It's basically even. But then we Boston project for more than double the ownership of Washington. So I just look at that, and I think Washington is a much better play to kind of pivot off of in terms of the odds of success.
All right. I get it. I'm going to get to a couple Boston bats. Nothing drastic whatsoever, but I think there's enough spots getting to some 2 and 3 mans that I don't have to try to, 5-man them up too much here, but they're one of 3 teams with double-digit top stack percentages. So I just at least wanted to bring them up in that regard. Then you get into this interesting territory: Detroit, Angels, White Sox, Minnesota, as you said, is just garnering a ton of ownership here. What is your favorite team that is not Colorado or Washington to be getting to on this slate?
My favorite team to get to is certainly not Colorado, just relative to the ownership they have.
Right.
But I think we could also talk about the merits of just overall stacking Colorado and how to go about rostering this team when they have the top stack odds on the slate. They're the chalk by a mile, 24.1% projected ownership for them over on DK. On FanDuel, also north of 20% ownership. So a very, very popular team, the Colorado Rockies today. And it's understandable why. They're home, they're at Coors Field. It's a fairly easy pitching matchup. But like I always say in these situations, it's just above the break-even point of a team that I'm actually looking to stack. So I have guys in here that I've rostered as one-offs, but I didn't make any Colorado Rockies stacks today. Did you?
I have some Colorado stacks. I definitely do. And I'm okay with it. Again, it's just how you go about piecing together the stack. And so for me, I have my 150 here, and I'm kind of like rotating through as some lineups get updated, I'm able to hand build and just change a couple of things specifically, but I'm going back and forth. And this is kind of one of the things too, is if you get your cruncher lineups in early, shout out to myself here. Congratulations for doing it one time. You're able to kind of go back and forth with some of our tools. And we got a guy like Ryan McMahon with 12.8% ownership, Sam Hilliard, 15.8% ownership. For me, it's finding some like 2 and 3 mans on the back half of that, or just making sure that I incorporate them with some of the more popular plays. And then I'm getting to pitchers like Darvish in that spot, Walker Buehler going up against San Diego, finding some ways of just making sure that I'm not chalky everywhere in some of these lineups. And, a guy like CJ Cron is so hard to get away from when you see 3,600 for his tag and 28.8%. I mean, that's a gigantic number, but somebody that's just such a good one-off. You can put him in your stacks, but you have to find other ways to get different. And I think just with enough other teams and enough other spots that I still like, I'm fine getting to the amount of upside that exists in a bat like that or a team like this, as long as I am different absolutely every other place. So that's all I'm kind of going through and being careful of with this team. And it's easy too, because I can basically just search them up and find the 5 mans in Cruncher and just make sure that in every single one of those lineups, I'm just adjusting things slightly to make sure that I'm not playing chalk anywhere else. But, contrary to myself who eats chalk, I do not want to be doing so in MLB DFS. But I do agree with anything I just said, or am I just off my base?
It's just the Colorado ownership amongst the hitters that I actually care about is so high. We have Trevor Story projected for 36% ownership, Brendan Rodgers 30%, CJ Cron 29%, Garrett Hampson 32%. If you're playing cash games today on DraftKings, you probably want to make a 5-man Rocky stack just because the pricing here is just so far off, and then you pay up for pitching. But in terms of the amount of ownership that's going here, I just don't think it's warranted to any of these players to this extent. If we weren't considering ownership, we were just considering the matchups, price point. The first thing I'd go to is the Colorado Rockies. No doubt. The price here is egregious. It's a terrific spot for them. But it's just way too much ownership for a slate of this size where it's 13 games, where every single core hitter in their lineup is right around 30 to 35% ownership. It's a lot. So I'll ask you then, when you're trying to make stacks that are contrarian, these individual plays on the Rockies, are you over or underweight to the field on them?
Let me pull it up here. Individual, I am under on Trevor Story. I'm under on Hampson. I'm under on Rodgers. I'm at the field on Cron. I'm under on Diaz. I'm over on Hilliard. I'm under on Daza, and I'm just at the field on McMahon. So it's a lot of more back end of the lineup that I'm getting to. I think that, they just don't tend to carry as much ownership, have a ton of upside there. Ryan McMahon on the season, just a guy who I expected to be hitting a lot better than he has, but he's still a pretty productive hitter in this lineup. And it hasn't been there. And I don't care about the recency bias of it, but his underlying metrics, especially earlier in the season, were just kind of jumping off the page. I mean, it's still a 426 expected slugging, a 44.5% hard hit percentage. It's pretty low for a guy, getting him like at the field on that number still, considering he's the lowest owned of every Rocky here in this spot from the hitting side. I got to be thinking, even at 4,300, just getting over on a spot like that with the amount of upside in this lineup, that left on left. I mean, Corbin, if I'm thinking that they're going to get knocked around here, or if they're going to knock Corbin around, give me exposure to some of these other guys that are going to be in just as good of a spot against whomever they decide to throw out from the bullpen against him. So I'm feeling just fine getting to the back end of that lineup.
Yeah, and then also Josh Gillum saying play them in cash and fade in GPPs. Because it's about ownership. It's the same thing with every single DFS sport in general. The chalky plays make for the best cash options in tournaments. Those are not always the best plays, because just think about it. If somebody is 80% owned on any given baseball slate, and this is just a generalization, you absolutely have to play them in cash games, and you almost never want to play that player in a GPP. So yeah, they're totally different. They're totally different gameplays with totally different strategies.
Okay, well, let's start talking about some teams that you do have some interest in, because that's what I'm interested in hearing. We see Detroit. They're getting some positive leverage. We've got Tampa Bay getting positive leverage, Toronto. We can go on and on. A lot of teams, if you were not playing that Coors Field game, if you're not playing Minnesota and you're not playing Boston, that you're going to get positive leverage. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams with negative leverage. Everybody else is in a positive spot. Who are some of the teams you're getting to at the highest clip?
Yeah, my favorite overall stack on this slate, other than the Washington Nationals, we talked about the merits of them. The New York Yankees going up against Hyun-Jin Ryu, who a couple of points on Hyun-Jin Ryu. First, he's coming off the injured list. He was dealing with a neck injury. So that's always a concern. Where is he at when he's coming back from injury? Number two, he has been so all over the place this year. And it's crazy because for the longest time, Ryu was a pitcher who had a moderate but not super high ceiling. But he was really safe, and he just didn't really churn out very many bad outings. You know, he had that year a couple of seasons ago where he was in the Cy Young mix, and he was nearly unhittable for a lot of the season, and just could not be more of an opposite in terms of the kind of pitcher he's been this year. And his overall numbers are definitely not good, but they're not totally terrible. 4.34 ERA, 4.44 expected ERA. But it's the variance in his game logs that's crazy. So here are the last handful of starts from Hyun-Jin Ryu. 27 fantasy points, -10, 9, 26, -3, 15, 28, -6, -5. So he's been all over the place. And by the way, those last two starts were fairly easy matchups against Baltimore and against Minnesota. He pitched a total of 4 1/3 innings in those two starts, gives up 12 runs, then goes on the injured list. Now his first start back from the injured list, like, hey, guess what you're coming back to? A New York Yankees lineup in the thick of a playoff race. This is massively important for playoff seeding. And the Yankees are picking up absolutely no ownership today. So the Yankees sub 1% owned. We have them as the top overall leverage stack. And I've made it a point to stack against Hyun-Jin Ryu out in the second half of the season, as is, just because of the variance. And now you're going to add in the Yankees' potent offense and all the power that's in it. And yeah, I think this is a spot as far as contrarian options go. I think there's a whole lot of upside in the Yankees offense that's just not being looked at by the field. And the price points here are just off as well. We've got Giancarlo Stanton, 4,700. Joey Gallo, 4,200. Anthony Rizzo, 4,300. The only player who's expensive here is Aaron Judge. Beyond that, we've got guys like Gary Sanchez, who's one of the most high upside catchers in the league. He's only 3,500. We've got DJ LeMahieu at 4,100. So the price points are too low here for an offense that is this much upside. And going up against a pitcher who I have no clue what to expect from today, but he's been bad more often than not lately.
Yeah, and embrace the variance on a high upside offense in a spot nobody else wants to. So I totally get that. I'm getting to 4% of them. Maybe give it a tiny bump up here. We still don't have a Twins lineup. Isn't that fun? I love when this happens because I doubt it's going to change anything as far as the ownership goes towards these guys. Maybe I don't know what they're possibly waiting on here. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. If that lineup doesn't come out here in the next 30 minutes before people crunch lineups, maybe you see some depreciated ownership there, but I'm doubting it. It's just too good of a spot, and they've been written up everywhere. They're talked about everywhere. So I doubt that that's going to be sneaky by any means against Alexander here in this spot. Anything else for you to kind of talk about for stacks? Because like for me, you had talked about AJ Alexy. I really like this Angels offense. They're just such cheap tags to get to. And on a pitching slate like this, where I want to be getting to a lot of Wheeler and a lot of Sale and a lot of Morton and a lot of Logan Webb, it's so easy to be playing Angels. I mean, yeah, putting Ohtani in there, but the rest of this entire lineup, I mean, you're getting Marsh for 2,200 on DK. You're getting Walsh for 3,600. That is way too cheap for a player of his quality against Alexy. Phil Gosselin, even batting cleanup, should not be batting cleanup, but that's a different conversation. Jack Mayfield, so cheap up and down this lineup. Easy for me to kind of write off Fletcher, Renifo, and then just play 1 through 7. But what are you doing elsewhere in your lineups? Do you have any Angels interest with me?
As one-offs, I mean, certainly the value makes sense. We do have this team with a 21% chance to be a top value stack on DraftKings, but it's also one of the more negatively leveraged stacks in both FanDuel and DK today. It's not quite in the same realm as being over-owned in our projections like the Colorado Rockies, the Boston Red Sox, the Minnesota Twins. Those teams are all massively negatively leveraged. There's just a slightly lesser negative leverage score on the Angels, who have 8% projected ownership, 5.2% chance to be a top stack. But by the way, that ownership is part of the reason I like Alexy today. It's not just that I look at Alexy and be like, oh, here's a great pitcher I feel confident in. He's going up against a bad offense that's also popular. So would I rather go against a bad pitcher who's not popular, or would I rather go up against a bad offense that is popular? And just picking the sides of that, I'm going to side with the pitcher for the leverage and ownership reasons, because I don't think Alexy is any worse than what the Angels are as an offense. It's a real, stoppable force versus a movable object. Everything is bad here. And then, like I said, also Ohtani's numbers in the second half of the season, they're not good. He's not playing well in the second half of the year. And that's kind of something where for the longest time, I just said, Ohtani is the MVP and Vlad is no real reason to be in the discussion. The reason that's not the case anymore is because with the struggles of Ohtani, they're kind of getting even in terms of what the wins above replacement is for the season. So looking at the second half of the year numbers for Shohei Ohtani, In September, he's been a little bit better now. He's brought his WRC plus up to 121, but in August, he only had a 98 WRC plus, and he's been striking out a lot. So it's certainly not what he was in the first half of the year. He's been more of a mortal hitter. And you consider how bad the rest of the lineup is, it's a pretty easy matchup. So I prefer to go to Alexi. If this was a contrarian cheap stack to look at, it would make sense, but they're pretty popular.
Would you be looking at putting any money on Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the markets? You are the foremost authority in such things here at Awesemo.com. So I thought I would ask.
No, I did it before the season, and I hedged with Ohtani, but no, not at this point. I still think Ohtani should win. It's actual discussion now. Like, I think there's merits to Vlad. And a month and a half ago, when Ohtani was still crushing, there really was no merits, because at that point, Ohtani had such a massive lead in terms of wins above replacement. You added up his offensive stats and his pitching stats. But Ohtani's been, I'm not going to say a replacement level player, but he hasn't been picking up ground on the field like he was early in the year. And it's gotten to a point where the gap is really narrowed. So I still expect Ohtani to win. I just think that there's a reasonable case to be made for Vlad now.
As we start closing out stacks here, is there somebody else that's like a sneaky stack that we haven't talked about whatsoever, that's a team that you're just getting to more? Because as I said, other than 7 teams out of these total 26, you're getting positive leverage everywhere. Cleveland's a team I really like. Houston's a team I really like, but hard to get to on this slate. Anybody else that's really sticking out to you that we haven't talked about yet?
Cleveland, just for leverage purposes. Mm-hmm. We talked about Brady Singer before and how he's oddly popular today. So when Brady Singer is going to be the most popular pitcher on the FanDuel slate, you get the Cleveland offense for only 1.3% projected ownership. That's something that I think really makes sense from a leverage standpoint. Then over on DK, we have Cleveland only picking up 1.5% ownership as a team. So there's a couple of factors here. Number one, they're just under-owned in general on our top stack stool. But then also, there is so much ownership going to Brady Singer, who's not particularly good. He's not one of the worst pitchers in the world, except he just doesn't warrant being the most popular pitcher on FanDuel or the most popular cheapish pitcher on DK. So I like the leverage that we're getting there on the Indians.
All right there with you. Let's talk some prize picks here before we get ourselves over to position by position, which, we always kind of close out with before we take questions. But of course, prize picks. That is the place you guys need to go right now using promo code Awesemo to get up to $100 instant match deposit bonus. All you have to do over there, it's just like playing props constantly like you would at a sports book anywhere else. But in states like California, where I'm at, this is how you end up getting invested in them. You pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players on the board to go over or under their projected scores. If you get all 5 right, you can net up to 10x. If you get 4 out of the 5, you get like a 4x or a 2x kind of payout for that. Even a 3 out of 5. I ended up having a bad day picking props in this Cowboys game yesterday, but I had a 3 out of 5, and they ended up giving me 0.4x back, which is just like over the course of a long haul playing some of these props, even stuff like that, getting some money back, that definitely goes towards your bankroll. And if you use that promo code Awesemo, it really takes care of a lot of those first couple bets for you. There's no way around it. One of the best interfaces. They have something online for you. They have that app that's just such an easy interface to be using, and props available in just about any sport you could possibly imagine. NBA when that gets back. MLB obviously is what we're covering here. NFL, WNBA, disc golf, cricket, whatever you want. I guarantee you there are props available for it. It's so easy to use. So go to the App Store, Google Play, download it now. Looking at our MLB player props tool, Chris Bassett is listed as the number 1 prop for our prop tool today, under 5.5 strikeouts for him. However, his line is at 4.5. That's a big kind of difference there, but I still think the expected ROI of that, based on where he's at, 46% expected ROI at 5.5, 4.5, I'm still willing to kind of be going to that number. Would you agree with that? And are there any other strikeout props or hitter props we should be looking at on prize picks today?
It's such a big difference going from 5.5 to 4.5, especially when you consider Chris Bassett. On the whole, he's been pretty solid this year. His results as of late haven't been as good, but for the season, 3.16 ERA, 3.29 FIP. His strikeout rate has been solid this year, 25.4%. If that considered, that's a number. If anything, I would actually say it's too low, but I wouldn't be willing to take the over on that number either. I think it's a number with Chris Bassett. I'd be expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 strikeouts from when you consider his overall strikeout numbers for the year. And he's also going to be at home in a favorable pitcher's park. That's just going to be a stay away for me. And then I think something else to consider about The projection we have there is, I mean, we do have a pretty high expected ROI being on the under 5.5, but also it's a full another strikeout. It's the number of prize picks I think is much more fair than what it is at sportsbooks.
Yeah, but an 89% win percentage on 5.5, it's not going to drop to, being on the flip side of that, like underneath 50% or anything. I still think that there is a little bit of room there, but no question about it. 4.5, 5.5, different number. The identical number exists though on Zach Wheeler for 6.5 strikeouts. I love him today. I'm getting to a ton of him. How about yourself? 6.5 strikeouts, over or under that?
Yeah, I like the over 6.5 for Wheeler. It's one thing that's a little bit of a concern is the matchup against the Atlanta Braves. And this is a game also that matters a whole bunch for both teams. So we're going to be seeing, full go offenses in both spots. But Zach Wheeler's had a really strong season. And another thing also that really benefits him is not only just the increased strikeout rate this year, but he works really deep into games, which gives him more opportunities for strikeouts. So not only does he have a 29.2% K rate for the year, but you look at some of the starts that he's had this season, how deep he works into games. He's gone at least 6 innings in all but one start since July 7th. So he had one start against the Mets where he only ended up going 5 innings a couple weeks ago. But other than that, 6 innings against Baltimore, 6 2/3, 6, 8 innings, 6 2/3, 9 innings, 7 1/3, 7 innings. When somebody's working that deep into games and they have a high strikeout rate, that's even more reason to like the strikeout numbers. I think sometimes the length that we're getting out of pitchers goes a little bit overlooked, but he's been so good with his walk numbers this year that it's really allowed him to pitch deeper into games. And then also just that he's had a rubber arm. They've let him throw a ton of pitches. So Zach Wheeler, I agree with you. I like the over there quite a bit.
All right. And so those are two you can be looking at. I know the guys on the last show had talked a little bit about the Colorado overs. CJ Cron, add him to the card. Play the overs and the unders of these players on their fantasy scores. Use that to kind of be another part of your DFS exposure today. It can be such an easy thing. And obviously, because you're not peer-to-peer on this the way that you are on DK FanDuel, you can just play the best plays. So use our tools that we have. Use that stacks tool, not the stacks tool. Use the MLB player props tool. Utilize that now. Easiest way you can get in the game. And thank you so much to Prize Picks for their sponsorship. Love playing over there, and I know you will too. All righty, we got ourselves a couple news items to kind of click on. We got a Twins lineup out. That's exciting. Max Kepler in the 8-hole is kind of a surprise against a lefty. Not something they've been doing a ton here. Somebody that has been in there against lefties in the past, but yeah, in the 8-hole today, Astudillo, I guess, in the 7-hole. Otherwise, it looks exactly how you would expect it to, 1 through 6 with Brent Rooker there. A little source of value, 2.3K if you're looking at stacking up the Twins, but still going to be garnering a ton of attention. Probably a team I'm probably going to be guiding elsewhere away from. And then Yadier Molina ended up getting scratched up against the Brewers here in this spot. So I'm not sure who they're going to have coming in there. But yeah, Yadier Molina, 6-hole for St. Louis. Get him out of your lineups. Probably shouldn't have been there against Brandon Woodruff anyway. Let's get to position by position here. You know the game. You know the drill. We've done this a number of times. You've done this with Josh. You've done it with me here. Let's start at the catcher position. Your favorite cash game option, your catcher you would be relying on in that format, and then your favorite catcher for tournaments.
Yeah, and by the way, there is going to be a lot of cash game options that are going to come from the Colorado Rockies here, and that's going to start at the catcher position. Elias Diaz, it's pretty hard to. And by the way, now that we have the Minnesota Twins lineup, and I'm just going to refresh ownership to make sure I have it correct. But Elias Diaz hitting in the middle of the Rockies lineup today, only 3,800 at the catcher position. He's projected for a ton of ownership today. He's going to be in about a quarter of the field's lineups, which that's a lot to swallow for tournament purposes, but for cash games, that becomes much less problematic. So I think Elias Diaz is the pretty clear cash option. And now I'm just going to refresh the ownership here to see who I'm most overweight to in terms of GPPs. But any consideration for you for maybe Mitch Garver in cash, or would it still be Elias Diaz?
Still going to be Elias Diaz, more than likely. Mitch Garver, 4K. Now that he's in the 3-hole, I guess you could be looking at that 276 ISO. For me, it just comes down to if you're going to be lower on the Colorado side, I have to play Diaz there in the 5-hole. I think that it's just $200 cheaper, allows for me probably get to some of the better pitchers. I'm going to build a cash lineup as we're going here and put that in a couple things. So I'm not going to pull an EMAC and throw out 20 head-to-heads here in the last 5 seconds, but I'm going to enter a couple things here and we'll kind of build it as we go. But Diaz for the $200 savings, if you can put that anywhere else in your lineup, I think it's probably the better play.
And then for tournament purposes, I really like Gary Sanchez today. We talked about the Hyun-Jin Ryu and all the variants it's been with them this year. On the whole, I don't think Hyun-Jin Ryu is a bad pitcher, but on any given day, he comes out and he looks like a total train wreck. So some of those starts we've seen from recently, like I said, over his last 4 1/3 inning, he's given up 12 earned runs, and that was in easy matchups. This spot against the Yankees could go south for him in a hurry. Gary Sanchez has a ton of power at the catcher position. Only project for 2% ownership. He's the guy that I like the most for tournaments.
All righty. And for me, Yasmani Grandal, it's a guy that I'm going to always play a ton of in tournaments. Underneath 7%, batting fourth there, 4,800. Find a way to get up to him. He's a one-off that I'm playing a lot today. Going to the first base position, I mean, we won't even talk about CJ Cron. If you don't play CJ Cron in cash, you should find something else to do. But talk to me about your tournament exposure, your favorite first base play.
Yeah, for cash games, like you said, pretty easily CJ Cron. He's projected for the most ownership at the position by a really wide margin. There's only 3 first basemen projected for double-digit ownership, and that is Shohei Ohtani, Bobby Dahlback, and CJ Cron. And Cron projects to be nearly a third of the field's lineups. He's probably going to be like 40 to 50% owned in cash games. For tournaments, I like Ryan Zimmerman. I like a lot of Yankees bats today. I like a lot of Washington bats. Ryan Zimmerman, we're putting him in Coors Field. He's facing a left-handed pitcher. Now, it's a good left-handed pitcher in Kyle Freeland, but for his career, Ryan Zimmerman has hit left-handed pitching really well. You're putting him in that favorable offensive environment at Coors Field, reasonable enough price point, and he's also only picking up single-digit ownership. So Zimmerman for me in tournaments.
All righty, moving ourselves to second base. Go ahead.
You didn't give out your first base GPP play.
Well, I think I said Bobby Dahlbeck before, but I guess he's popular at 13.5%.
I think it's still be your answer, though.
Let me look at my lineups.
That's your answer.
Yasmani Grandal. I guess he's got dual eligibility. Just found that out now as I'm looking through my lineups. Good times to figure that out. That's why I'm getting to more of him. On Cruncher, though, you can click the button so that you can make him only catcher. What a nifty little tool this Fantasy Cruncher is. Thank you, Fantasy Cruncher. Enjoy you very much. If I'm not going to be throwing him in, on the other side of that game, Jonathan Scope, just getting no love here. He's 4,400. A one-off I really, really like. Grades out well for us. 2.7% ownership. Play some Jonathan Scope in your life. That is my really unowned guy. I got 6% of him. I'm double the field, so I just wanted to throw him out. Otherwise, CJ Cron, Bobby Dahlbeck, I'm getting to in bunches, as well as Ryan Zimmerman. All right, second base, go ahead.
So second base, for cash games, I think it's Brendan Rodgers pretty clearly. For tournaments, the ownership is so concentrated. We've got Jose Iglesias, Brendan Rodgers, and Jorge Polanco. That makes up basically 2/3 of the field's lineups. And so if you're playing anybody else other than those guys, you're basically being contrarian at the position because, like I said, those 3 guys, Brendan Rodgers, Jose Iglesias, Jorge Polanco, all picking up a good deal of ownership. Nobody else really popular at second base. So I'm kind of spread out at the position. I don't have one guy who really stands out above other people. I guess Isaac Paredes, we didn't really talk about the Tigers much, but they are a team that also rates out as being under-owned in our top stacks tool. And he's a cheap second baseman that isn't picking up much ownership, 5%. So I'm a little bit overweight to him, but there's not one second baseman that I'm really massively high on. It's more just I'm light on the guys who are popular.
I think that that's a really good way to go about it. I'm just fine with that. All the way down there, Jonathan India against Reynaldo Lopez, somebody that I'm getting to at 5K, just to lead off. Again, I'm just kind of isolating a lot of these one-offs, putting them together with more popular stacks. And that's somebody that was showing up for me as well as Trey Turner, which is random because he's popping up big time for me up against Darvish, and nobody's going to be clicking on that name. He's 5,800. He's almost impossible to get to. But again, if you're going to be playing a lot of Angels like me, I have a lot of salary to spend up at some of these positions for my one-ups to Grandal, to Trey Turner. So that's kind of how my lineups are being constructed, going down with a couple of my stacks. Washington, there's a ton of savings to be had compared to most teams that you're stacking up in Coors. So I feel like that's going to kind of be the way that I go about building. And, you know, I'm happy to have that be what makes or breaks my day. To third base we go. On the top end, Josh Donaldson, I feel like, is going to be the guy you're going to get to in cash games. But do you have anybody that you would be looking to differently and then your tournament play?
Yeah, I'd actually rather get to Rafael Devers in cash games. He's also going to be fairly popular, and it's a left-on-left matchup, but it's the Baltimore Orioles pitching staff. So he's going to be facing a very crappy right-handed pitcher at some point in this game. And Devers, who overall has had a really strong season at the plate, he's actually my overall favorite third base play if we were to take ownership out of the equation. Even in tournaments, I'm getting to him a good deal. I think he's a good one-off bat. But in terms of guys who I'm going to be overweight to, Yohan Moncada at only 4%, hitting in the middle of the White Sox lineup. Moncada's had a little bit of a disappointing season, but he's still a high upside bat. This is a good matchup for Chicago. And once again, he's cheap at only 4,000. So I think that he's somebody who's worth being overweight to. But on the high end, once again, we've got a lot of the ownership at third base is going to Donaldson and Devers. It's a couple of guys, whether it's in general, most positions, it's Rockies, Red Sox, Twins. That makes up like 60 to 70% of the ownership at every position.
Yeah. Jack Mayfield, I'm getting a ungodly number would be the right number. It's too much. It's going to come down in the next 15 minutes, but Jack Mayfield is the guy that I want to be the winner in tournaments at third base. I'm going to guess that that's pretty unpopular. Play more than the field of Jose Ramirez. I mean, going up against Brady Singer, we're looking for that leverage. I have 13% of him, and I'm very happy to be getting to him as one of my most popular one-offs. So definitely fire him up. All right, to shortstop we go. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the ownership here, once again, is so concentrated. It is 36% projected ownership to Trevor Story, 16% for Xander Bogaerts, 16% for Jorge Polanco. So cash games, just considering that information, Trevor Story at home against a bad left-handed pitcher. That end, Trevor Story is way too cheap at 4,600. He's the obvious cash game play. In tournaments, I'm getting to him more than any other shortstop on the slate, but that still ends up with me being well underweight to the field on him just because he's so popular, 36%. If I'm trying to be a little more contrarian, let's see who's actually popping up for me more than the field at a decent clip. Josh Harrison, a little bit of 4,200, but once again, not somebody I'm getting to at a crazy amount. Gio Urshela is batting ninth for the Yankees, but he's projected for less than 1% ownership. So I have Gio Urshela in 6% of my lineups right now, just given that he's projected for 0.6% ownership. $3,200, another one of those Yankees in that really highly volatile matchup against Hyun-Jin Ryu. So I guess Urshela, by definition, is my favorite GPP play because he's the one I'm most overweight to.
Corey Seager's under 1%. I'm going to play guys like Corey Seager when they're under 1% as a one-off. So I've got 7% of him. So I mean, a 7x the field on him. But in terms of popularity, Willy Adames is 3,500. I need some savings at some other spots when I'm playing some of these more expensive one-offs. But yeah, again, I'm looking at these Angels. Renifo, I was getting to a ton of and then kind of trimmed him down, but he's still there in a meaningful way in the 8-hole. I don't love it. I kind of don't like it whatsoever. And I'm going to probably trim him now that I'm looking at it too, but you got to find some ways to get to these pitchers. And he's one of the routes. So Aledmys Diaz as well, somebody that in the 7-hole, 3,600 won't be popular whatsoever. Not nearly as good of a play. Trevor Story is just winning out the position. I'm going to the field. Like I'm just trimming him down. He's the one guy that I think you just don't want to be playing him as a one-off. Make sure you have some kind of a rule in place. I mean, maybe you can. It depends on what else you have in your lineup. And I'm playing CJ Cron as a one-off, so I can't be totally biased there. But Trevor Story, that's a ridiculous number. I will take the field for sure. To outfield we go. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you could also just go into Fantasy Coach and reduce the overall ownership share of your lineups. And if you set a cap on it, it's not going to give you very many Rockies if you just set an ownership cap, because every single player in that lineup is so popular that if you just set your lineup where it's like, hey, I don't want any more than, I don't know, just making up a number, so like 150% ownership in your lineups. You just can't get to very many Rockies in that kind of situation.
Good call. Good call. I tend not to be doing that as much, mainly because it fluctuates and sometimes you end up like right up against it. And I do want to get to some 5-man Rockies, but as a whole, totally agree with you. That is a great way to do it. To outfield we go. Go ahead and round this thing out for us.
Yeah, I mean, cash games. I think it's a little weird how much more popular Byron Buxton is than somebody like JD Martinez when he's $600 more expensive. But I mean, either way, for cash games, some combination of Garrett Hampson, Byron Buxton, Hunter Renfroe, JD Martinez. Those would be the core guys I consider. For tournaments, my overall favorite play at the position is Juan Soto. Coors Field, pay up option, but to me, he's the guy that warrants the most ownership at the position. He is my overall favorite GPP hitter for the slate as a whole. Lane Thomas, he's somebody else who I really like, works in stacks there. Giancarlo Stanton, another player I really like today. So once again, just kind of correlating with some of my favorite stacks today, Washington Nationals, New York Yankees. I think those are the teams to really look at the hardest.
Yeah, Shohei Ohtani, Philip Gosselin, a lot of these Angels popping up for me over on this side too. Getting to some of these one-offs, the Byron Buxton, I love him. He's my favorite player in all of baseball, and I'm lower than the field on him. That's painful to say out loud, but I think that's just kind of what you got to do on these 13 game slates where somebody's getting 22, 24% ownership. I agree with your point there. JD Martinez, for him getting a little bit less ownership for a much cheaper number, I would much rather go his direction if trying to pick between one or the other. Brandon Marsh, another guy I'm getting a crazy amount of. And then if we're just looking to teams that aren't the Angels, so I don't just list off all of them here, we've got Mike Yastrzemski now up in the 6 hole, 4,300 going up against Weaver in San Francisco. That total's a little bit higher than what I was kind of expecting it to be. He's been batting 8th here a lot, but now they've got Steve Duggar there. Alex Dickerson just got back to the majors here after being out there for a little bit. But looking at this San Francisco team, it is crazy how good they've been against right-handed pitching on this season. You got to start buying into it at a certain point. And so getting some Crawford, Wade, and him, definitely something I'm looking at doing on this slate as well. Wind's blowing out 12 miles an hour to right field. Not that it's suppressed for wind, that entire ballpark is, but definitely with a 5 implied run total. San Francisco Giants in the outfield, I'm getting to quite a bit. So wanted to point them out as well. Anything else to talk about from a hitter's perspective before we get some questions in here?
One thing about the wind in San Francisco, that's just standard there. And the ballpark is made to mitigate the effects of the wind. So that shouldn't really change anything. It's just normal.
Yep, I said that. I mean, I was just looking at it as like, it's nice that it's not blowing in. So that's a plus because it definitely still affects it blowing in. I've been to that stadium. You feel it in your face. It is cold as all hell. Anyway, we've got questions coming in. I'm excited to be talking baseball again. It's nice to have a gigantic Tuesday slate. Yesterday was kind of sad because coming off of NFL, week 3 was pretty good, but it wasn't fantastic. And then I just gave all the money back to the showdown gods on Sunday night and Monday night. It's nice to have a nice big baseball slate to be talking about, but let's get some questions in. If you have anything that you guys want to know coming into this slate, Charles Kelly says Scope and Soto or Kiki and JD Martinez for a FanDuel GPP.
Let's see, Scope and Soto, or I mean, just getting to Martinez and Hernandez together, that's going to give you more correlation. So that's just going to be my answer when you have 2 players who are on the same team and in a good situation. And then on the other side, while I really like Juan Soto, like there's no real correlation there with Scope. So Hernandez and Martinez.
Oh, I guess Butthole Jenkins. You know what? I've been mean to Butthole today. I've been very, very mean to Butthole. How many times can I say Butthole in the next however many times? We got to give some dong picks for Butthole. That's a weird way of saying that back to back. Go ahead, Greg Ehrenberg. Save me from myself.
All right. So, well, first of all, because Eric's about to just go list that, because Eric's pick is going to be Juan Soto here. He's not allowed to do that.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's see. I'm going to go with Giancarlo Stanton.
Love it.
It seems like an answer that's kind of obvious. However, then you go look at the ownership and it's Giancarlo Stanton is $4,700 on DK today and project for 0.8% ownership going up against a left-handed pitcher. So I would generally say that maybe Giancarlo Stanton is cheating, except he's relatively inexpensive and he's not picking up any ownership today. So I think it's fair play if the field's not rostering him.
Yeah, how about under 1% Kyle Tucker? Kyle Tucker's always my dong pick. I think that's kind of cheating as well. But under 1%, I don't feel so bad about it. The thing is, Houston's just really hard to get to unless you're going to be playing Chas McCormick in that lineup, in which case a lot of your 5-man stacks are going to look pretty similar, I think, if you're paying up for pitching. I think that's still the optimal way. So I will kind of stick with my pick that I had said earlier there. Mike Yastrzemski, 6 hole, tiny bit of a lineup upgrade for a guy that obviously was batting higher in the order earlier this season, but he's been in the 8 hole quite a bit, up to 6. I'm willing to be taking some shots on him as a one-off going up against Luke Weaver. So Mike Yastrzemski, that is definitely going to be off the board. So enjoy that one, everybody. Let us know what we got Willy Adames scratched. That is bad for me. That is bad in terms of building lineups.
Were you rostering him a lot?
I had him. I mean, he was just cheap. He was 3,500 at shortstop. And when trying to get off of all of the Trevor Story chalk, I mean, obviously a 3 implied total up against Adam Wainwright isn't great, but I had like 8% of him. He was grading out decently well for us. So let me kind of do something quick here. Willy Adames out. That is. All right. So you update that. I'm going to go to. So Eric and I have given our home run picks. Eric, very bold of him to not just pick the most expensive player at Coors Field, which is generally par for the course from. I think the last time we did one of these shows together, there was a Coors Field game the Dodgers playing. He was like, "How about Mookie Betts?"
and just
I did say that.
Yes, you absolutely did. But
yeah, I'm a bad person.
There's no doubt about it, and you should feel bad about yourself. We all know the things that you've done.
He was in course. He was in course too.
He was in Coors Field, just the most obvious pick of the day, and he didn't homer that day either. So shame on you.
0, I'm pretty sure.
I'm going to go to our MLB player props tool, and I personally really like the number that's being given out at sportsbooks today. Somebody who I already liked a decent amount as a GPP option for the day. Gary Sanchez, catching option for the Yankees, cheap on DK, cheap on FanDuel. Talked about how much that matchup against Hyun-Jin Ryu, all the variance it brings. Gary Sanchez is plus 500 to homer today. We have him homering 22% of the time in this matchup. That gives him a 31% expected ROI. So that is my favorite home run bet on the board. That is Gary Sanchez plus 500 to homer. So that is going to be my betting pick of the day. And I feel pretty good about that. But Eric, how are those Willy Adames lineups coming around?
It's 8%. I shouldn't be that freaked out about it. I mean, what time does that game lock to? It's the 5:10 window out here, or what would it be? 8:10 for normal person time?
Oh yeah, who could do the math on that? That's, what are we physicists here? That's
I was gonna say, how dare I, live in the best possible place to make lineups. Gene B. Kim knows. Let me just say, Gene B. Kim knows this is where you want to be living. West Coast is the best coast. Anyway. Any questions you guys have to kind of finish this out? Charles Kelly, you, my guy, thank you. And then thanks, Greg Ehrenberg. That's nice because I believe there was the show we did last week where somebody gave a $5.99 super chat saying, Greg Ehrenberg, thank you so much for your advice. And then he said, for $1.99, Eric, you're okay too. So I thought that was pretty epic personally.
Yeah, and by the way, also it was a little bit of a stack deck in my favor. That's somebody who talks to me a lot on Twitter and asks me a lot of questions. So but Ryan Nelson is saying it is a 4:45 West Coast time. Good on him for figuring out the math there, because that's high level stuff right there.
We do have savior.
We do have some other home run picks in the chat. Jonathan Adams, top 3 donk picks from him: Bader, Stanton, Realmuto. Hey, I went with Giancarlo Stanton as my pick, so no issues for me. Michael Knack, he was picking Soto, a little bit cheating there. Byron Buxton, Trey Mancini. Soto and Buxton, those are 2 of the most popular bats on the slate. Trey Mancini is a little bit off the board. Thomas Tyner, he was going with Hunter Renfroe as his home run pick. Card Shark, he's going with Aaron Judge, who, once again, I think very, very similar to the Giancarlo Stanton pick, as in we've got right-handed power in the Yankees lineup going up against Hyun-Jin Ryu, and there's no ownership going to the Yankees. So I like a lot of these picks that chat's on here.
Somebody said Kiner Falefa, global swap for Adames, but then I have to play Kiner Falefa, and I don't want to do that. So there's that part of it too. Not that Texas is in the worst spot. So, I mean, maybe I'll have a little bit anyway, but all right, we got it all fixed here. Greg, I mean, we got 2 minutes here before lock. That's what we're here doing, is the live before lock show. But you got all your lineups in, you ready to rock?
Yep, I am all good to go, but we could close out also answering Arcafels' question here, which I already answered in the YouTube chat, but he wanted to know Lane Thomas or Randy Arozarena, and he did not come close to spelling Arozarena correctly. But that aside, I will say Lane Thomas.
Call him out here. Call him out. All right, everybody, get your lineups in. Mike Zunino going long. Ahmed Rosario hit the cycle tonight? ? No, butthole. He's not hitting for the cycle tonight. I will bet you any amount of money that you possibly want. I will literally, you know what I will do? I will eat a box of chalk on a stream if Ahmed Rosario hits for the cycle. I will eat a whole box of chalk. Like, I feel pretty safe about that. Enjoy that sweat, Eric. That'll be kind of what everybody's looking forward to. What do you think about that, Greg? I will eat a whole box on stream.
I think Ahmed Rosario disappoints everybody by hitting 3 home runs today instead of for the cycle.
Well, there you go. Get some exposure. He's not Trevor Story, so that's useful. But guys, thank you so much. That's the Live Before Lock show here. By the time you guys hear this, you won't be able to react to anything that we're saying more than likely. Or, it's like 15 seconds. It's 45 seconds before lock here. But let's round this one out. Greg, any final words for the people?
Nope. We haven't really asked for it enough today, but once again, do us a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because the only way for Eric Lindquist to really be eating chalk is not only does Ahmed Rosario have to hit for the cycle, but we need to get an unspecified amount of likes and subscriptions during the show. So do that, and Ahmed Rosario hits for the cycle, and Eric will destroy all of his innards.
Mike Diamond, Mom always said life is like a box of chalk. Yeah, that's delicious. Love that. We're going to sign off with that comment. Thank you again to Prize Picks. do hit that like button. It goes a long way for us. But he's Greg Ehrenberg. He's the man. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm just a simple man. We'll see you later. I'm just like this shit. Let's be serious.